Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for a virtual meeting in support of Atlanta Public Schools and its students, teachers, and staff. Although we are not meeting in person at the Alonzo A. Krim Center for Learning and Leadership, this will be a formal meeting of the Atlanta Public Schools Board of Education because we expect a quorum of members to be on this virtual meeting. We will now call the September 8th, 2020 board meeting to order. Mr. Gaither, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Representing Educational District 1, Ms. Leslie Grant.
Present.
Representing Educational District 2, Ms. Loretta Balden.
Present.
Representing Educational District 3, Ms. Michelle Olympiadis.
Present.
Representing Educational District 4, Ms. Nancy Meister.
Present.
Representing Educational District 5, Ms. Erica Mitchell. Representing Educational District 6 and Board Vice Chair, Ms. Ishay Collins. Representing Educational District at Large, Seat 7, Ms. Candace Wood Jackson. Representing Educational District at Large, Representing Educational District at Large, Seat 8, Ms. Cynthia Briscoe Brown.
Present.
Representing Educational District at Large, Seat 9 and Board Chair, Mr. Jason Estevez.
Present.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gaither. I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the August 3rd board meeting.
So moved. Second. Michelle
Been
Olympiadis.
properly moved by Cynthia Briscoe Brown, seconded by Michelle Olympiadis. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The meeting minutes have been approved. Mr. Gaither, are there any other minutes we need to approve from the various meetings we had last month?
Yes. Can we come back to that?
Check in on that. I just wanted to, I didn't know whether that was right or not. I just thought about it.
Yeah.
Let's move on and I'll entertain a motion to approve the meeting agenda for the September 8th board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
It's been properly moved by Cynthia Briscoe Brown, seconded by Loretta Balden. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll move forward with the work session items. So let's turn it over to Dr. Herring. Good afternoon, Dr. Herring. You're on mute. Uh-oh.
So good afternoon, or evening, or afternoon. Yeah, good afternoon, Board Chair Estevez. And thank you, and good afternoon to everyone joining, all of our other board members. We have 4 presentations today. We will begin with Dr. Angela King-Smith, Chief Engagement Officer, and Carolyn Barnett, Director of Charter System and School Governance, who will present updates on the district's charter system operating model, as well as our GO teams and the elections, which started today. Next, Rachel Sprecher, Executive Director of Partnerships and Development, will provide her annual report on partnerships in Atlanta Public Schools. Following her, Katika Levitt, Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, will provide our first COVID-19 public health checkpoint. I will then close our presentations with the Day 1 2020 report. 2.01 is our first item, strategic plan update. Charter system, the strategic plan update, charter system operating model, and GO teams update. Dr. Angela King-Smith, Chief Engagement Officer, and Carolyn Barnett, Director, Charter System and School Governance. For our first presentation, I invite Dr. Angela King-Smith and Ms. Barnett, Carolyn Barnett, and to provide an update on our charter system operating model and GO teams. They will review the timeline and activities involved in renewing our charter system agreement with the Georgia Department of Education, as well as the GO team elections, which started today. Dr. King-Smith and Ms. Barnett, we are ready for your reports.
Thank you, Dr. Herring. Good afternoon, Board Chair Estevez and board members. We are excited to bring an update regarding our APS charter system model as well as GO teams. Next slide. Today, we will review the charter system framework. We will provide a year at a glance on the APS Charter System Initiative as outlined by our state contract. And we're planning to share with you important updates, as you mentioned, Dr. Herring, regarding the Go Team election, as well as other updates for Go Teams and our clusters. Next slide. The goal of the charter system and school governance is really to ensure local school governance teams are operating effectively and efficiently. And we want to make sure that our schools are supported and empowered to make decisions that best meet the needs of their unique school communities. Here on this slide, you see the composition of our team. I want to thank them publicly for all of their work. Carolyn Barnett serves as the director. Chandra Gibson serves as our school governance coordinator, and Diane Jacoby serves as our school governance liaisons. All of them bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to our work regarding our charter system and school governance office. Next slide, please. At the heart of our charter system and our school governance work is our mission and our vision. And so we bring our mission and vision to life as a part of our charter system contract. It's incorporated into that contract, and we make sure that our Go Teams and those that serve on those Go Teams know and understand about our mission and our vision, and really support our direction, our future direction, to be a high-performing school district where students love to learn, educators inspire, families engage, and the community trust the system. They're an essential part to building that ecosystem. Next slide. With a focus on our charter system philosophy that schools will operate in different ways, we want them to be empowered to design solutions that free them from various educational mandates from the state. And outlined here are the basic components as outlined by the state regarding the charter system, both a commitment to innovation and changing district culture, to innovate district requirements and innovate related to state law, policy, and district policy, freedom and flexibility in exchange for increased accountability, and making sure that you're implementing what we call them Go Teams. At the state level, they're referenced as LSGTs or local school governing teams, that you're required to distribute part of autonomy to those schools to be able to do that work. Next slide, please. Highlighted here is our roadmap over the past 5 years. We've done a lot of work with the charter system, and here lays out the work that we've done. And many of these things have been accomplished, and I'll be going into those details on the following slides. But as you can see, it started back in 2014 and goes through the end of this school year, 2021. Next slide. Here are the essential innovation features within the APS charter system contract. And these features were built in the contract 5 years ago, where we put our ideas around signature programs, positive behavior support approaches, and restorative justice practices. Wraparound services was an important part to that charter system contract. Revising HR systems to support efficient and effective recruitment. Our College and Career Academy is a part of that contract with Atlanta Tech. Budgetary flexibility, as well as authentic community engagement through our school Go Teams. Next slide, please. And then here you can see both our academic and organizational performance goals, as well as our and the sub goals underneath each of those major areas. Next slide. Although it does not seem like it's a really long process, here's the process that and the steps that we took to initially apply for the charter. Here's the steps that we need to take to renew the charter. And so outlined here are the steps that we'll need to take with the state to renew our charter. We'll have to file a renewal letter of intent. We'll have to complete the charter system renewal application process. We'll need to submit that to this Board of Education for your review and final approval. And then we'll submit the charter system application to the Georgia DOE. And so here you can see some of our targets in terms of major milestones to be able to get this submitted by February, the end of February 2021. Next slide. And so here are some of the activities that we will be engaging our community as well as this board and the administration. We'll need to create a letter of intent regarding the direction that we'll want to go. If we plan to renew, we'll need to submit that letter. We'll also need to work on our application, which is the bulk of the work, and outlining specific things that we want in that application. We'll also go through a community information gathering process. We did that the last time with surveys and polls and sessions. We'll have to figure out what that engagement process best looks like for this time period. And then we'll need to review the application. And so we'll be coming before the board for other work session items. We'll be presenting draft information for your review. And so then we will then move towards approval and then submitting to the state. Next slide. Last time, our theory of change, this is the theory of change that was incorporated into that application. If we build the capacity of school-based leadership teams and empower them, then they will make decisions that best meet the needs for their unique school communities so that they will be positioned to achieve a mission of ensuring that our kids are ready to graduate for college and career. Next slide, please. And then outlined within the application, we had to identify the challenges that the system was encountering. And at the time, these were the challenges that we had specifically outlined that we wanted to use the charter system application and the support of the charter system to help address those challenges. Challenge 1 around trust and engagement of our stakeholders. Challenge 2 was around a predictive path to college and career readiness. Challenge 3 was around talent management, having the systems to recruit, retain, and develop talent across the district. And then challenge 4 was systems that were not driving achievement of the academic vision. And so these were some of the major challenges, and we had to prioritize those challenges as a part of that application process. We'll have to do the same thing again for this renewal timeframe. Next slide, please. And so here is some of the details within the application around each of those challenges. I won't spend a lot of time on this particular side, but we wanted to incorporate it so that you can see both the challenges as well as some of the strategies that we implemented over the past 5 years to address those particular challenges. Everything from schools and clusters, that was a part of really supporting a positive culture, really building in and incorporating our SEL work was a part of the culture components, and partnerships, which I know Rachel Sprecher will be coming to speak to. That was also a part of the charter system application. Next slide. And then on the academic programs, here is just some of the highlights in terms of some of that work regarding STEAM and STEM, the career academies, and our graduation rate at the time was a part of the application process. When we began the process, we were at 59.1% as our graduation rate. And then over time, that particular metric is built into our charter system contract. And so here you can see in terms of some of those results, but both the school level strategies as well as the district level results and some of those strategies that we put in place within the as a part of the contract. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, the Collagen Carrera Academy launched fully this year in our own building and in our own facility. It's one of the more profound and innovative features in our APS charter system contract. And this year it opened at our former Parks Middle School, and the building's dedicated to Dr. Michael Mays, who was a champion for all CTAE programs. This was a part of the design back 5 years ago, and this year we're implementing the full complement of the College and Career Academy. Next slide. Slide 17. And so in terms of the talent management, here you can see some of the strategies that were implemented to help us to recruit and retain and develop our staff. A compensation study was a part of that. Career pathways and leadership development was also a part of that, as well as budget flexibility for schools to hire the staff that they needed. Next slide. Regarding systems and resources, funding for instruction increased by 34% from 2014 to 2019. HR and finance have gone through system upgrades to really foster decision-making at the local school level. And we implemented student success funding model that also allocates funds to schools based on student characteristics. Next slide. Now at this time, I will ask Carolyn Barnett, the director of charter system work, to review the work of Go Teams, including the elections process that is currently underway that kicked off today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Angela King-Smith. APS school governance teams, which we call Go Teams, were established as part of the charter system model. They work with school leadership to determine the long-term direction of the school, designing innovative solutions to increase student achievement, and serve as school ambassadors to the community. And as this slide details, that this is the structure of our current Go Teams. Next slide. APS designed the governance framework to ensure Go Teams are meeting the high quality standards that you see here. This is from the Georgia Department of Education. Next slide. So with our framework, we outline the effective governance, training, support, planning, flexibility, monitoring, and feedback our district, schools, and governance teams needed to be successful. And as Dr. King-Smith mentioned, today we will highlight some of the glows and grows for 2019, 2020, and also discuss the elections. Next slide. Under our governance, 91% of our Go Teams were in compliance this year. And this means they were fulfilling their meeting requirements and posting their required documents online. We would like to see 100% of Go Teams in compliance next year. We are encouraged that more school leaders are reporting using flexibility to ensure instruction and student supports are being tailored based on students' needs. As it relates to meetings, Go Teams easily transitioned to virtual meetings during the health emergency, and we were able to see an increase in public participation. Next slide. APS has developed a number of trainings that Go Team members are required to take, and you can see them over on the left. Also, each year, the School Governance Office develops a tiered list of schools that we provide support, and we want to make sure that that tiered list is provided appropriately so that we can provide the support appropriately to each school. The office also designs the Go Team Summit and Charter System Foundation workshops to support the work of Go Teams. This is to increase knowledge and understanding of topics such as teamwork, strategic planning, flexibility, and governance roles and responsibilities. Next slide. Schools are building roadmaps to successful student achievement. Strategic planning is occurring, and Go Teams are focusing on their strategic priorities and key performance measures. Schools are also implementing their signature programs with fidelity. Our next steps are to provide principals with suggested data points to share with their Go Teams to assist them in decision-making. And we also would like to work with Go Teams around those strategic conversations that are needed to ensure that they are making those needed decision-making. Next slide, please. APS has implemented monitoring and assessment tools for governance team compliance and to provide timely information for improvements. The office conducts at least 3 website reviews a year for all Go Teams to ensure web pages are updated. This includes Go Team member names, meeting dates, public comment format, meeting documents, and the school strategic plan. The office is in the process of developing a feedback rubric to share with Go Teams immediately after observing a meeting. We believe that this will help to build strong and effective teams. Next slide. A number of mediums have been created to keep our stakeholders informed. We communicate via email. We have monthly newsletters that go out to our Go teams. You can find the most updated information on our APS Strong Schools website. And we use Twitter to ensure that the public is kept up to date about meetings, cancellations, and other important news and events. We would like to expand those avenues to communicate the positive work of Go teams and schools. Next slide, please. So each year, the Go Team office holds elections to seat Go Team members. The election did not occur in the spring as normal due to COVID-19. However, we are excited to say that voting for the 2022 parents and staff member seats officially opened today. And I believe as we checked around 2 o'clock, we had about 1,000 voters who've already cast their vote. So we're very excited about that. Households with students currently enrolled in APS should have received their household's unique link in 2 of the following ways: text, email, or by mail based on phone numbers and addresses in our APS database. School staff should have received their unique link via their APS email. As it relates to first meetings for this school year, schools have until September the 11th to notify our office of their meeting date and time, and they have until October the 2nd to have their first meeting. Next slide, please. This slide indicates our process for elections. After the elections, Go teams will meet to elect their officers and cluster representatives. Next slide, please. You can expect to hear or see something about our Go team elections. We want to encourage our parents and staff members to let their voices be heard by voting. Next slide, please. So each year we provide our Go teams with a meeting at a glance guide. This is to ensure that teams are able to properly plan and prioritize prior to budget season. So as you can see, the normal state mandated 6 meetings per year, but on average, we found that a lot of teams are meeting 8 or more times per year. Next slide, please. Schools will elect cluster representatives at their next meeting after the Go team election. Our goal is to begin cluster advisory meetings in mid to late October. Next slide, please. And finally, some may ask, why is this work important? And I hope this quote helps to answer the why, specifically this part. It says, then we can all work together, teachers, neighbors, senior citizens, businesses, and everyone else, to really leave no child behind. This is the end of our presentation, and we welcome your questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Barnett and Dr. King-Smith. Are there any questions from board members? Or if you can signify that by raising your virtual hand. And while I wait on board members, I do have a question about the election today that's going on. So it's my understanding, and I need to vote. So I need to make sure I vote for my. I got a text message today, by the way, which is great to receive the text with the link. But it's ranked choice voting. Can you explain that?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Estevez. So it's the highest vote, and it's the way the vendor sets it up. It's we will go with the highest 2 votes. And so as they're going through, they will continue to calculate. So the highest 2 votes will be the winners.
Okay.
And you can look at, at the end of the voting period, we will show where the, you look at the first round, and then you'll see the highest 2 votings. And then just in case of a tie, you will see the second round and that will determine who breaks the tie.
Which is why it's ranked choice, which is why we want people to select multiple candidates,
Yes.
and rank them. We have questions from Michelle Olympiadis and then Cynthia. Michelle?
Cynthia might have been ahead of me. I'm getting her hand up, but I think that somehow that needs to be better communicated if that's the case, because there's some folks out there on social media saying that if you only want to vote for one person, you just rank the one person. If we really want to encourage the ranking, I think some communication needs to go out, because there are some questions in the community about why we are ranking as opposed to voting per se. I just want to share that, because I didn't realize it was ranking until I read some of the social media this morning. And I wasn't necessarily prepared to force rank. I was just going to vote for the candidates that I thought would be best for the position, but now I'll go back and rank them, since that seems to be what you're really wanting folks to do.
No, what we're asking is for, thank you, I'm sorry, Board Member Olympiad. We're asking staff and parents to choose the candidates, the top two candidates, because there were 2 seats.
Mm-hmm.
You would choose the candidates that you would want to fill those 2 seats. The ranking will occur based on like first choice. You'll see in the first voting, Michelle Olympiadis won by 75%. Jason Estevez won by 72%, or just something like that. And so in case of a tie, that's where they use the ranked voting. So we're asking to only vote, if you would like, for the 2 candidates of your choice. A lot of people will vote for more than one because they want to rank them, but we're asking to vote for the 2 candidates of your choice.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Cynthia?
Yeah, I would agree that we need to do some better explanation of that. The ranked voting, if it's actually applied and people seem to think that it is going to be applied, might well result in a different outcome than just voting for 2 and counting them up. I'll say my son did a middle school math fair project on voting theory, and it's the only one any of my children ever did that went on to state. But so I actually know a little bit about this, but it really can significantly change the results. And so I think we need to do an additional push on communication to explain why we're doing it that way, and that the ranked voting results will not be used unless there is a tie, because I didn't understand that until you said it just now.
Sure.
So if we can just maybe get something out to all the people that we sent, whatever kind of reminders, whether that's text or email, just do another round and be very, very clear on how we plan to use those results.
We'll do that. I will say, and Carolyn can attest to this, is this our 4th election?
Yes.
This is our 4th election. And every time we've done a major election, we always have ties. And so this is something that we've incorporated into the process because we've had so many ties at the local school governance level.
Well, and it's easier to have ties, particularly where there are a lot of people running and not a lot of people voting. If the voting population at a particular school is fairly small and there are a lot of people running, then you can end up with that. But if again, I guess it's just that I think this is a good way to resolve ties. But if that's what we're going to do with it, as opposed to using it for all results, the community needs to know that and needs to understand it.
We'll make the communication push.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I should give kudos to you, Dr. Kingsmith and Ms. Barnett, because ranked choice voting is what they consider a best practice because it avoids the runoffs, it avoids ties, it avoids a lot of the issues. And a lot of people are actually advocating for elections to office, to elected roles across the country be ranked choice. And in fact, some cities across the country have adopted that kind of voting to ensure that you just have a more efficient voting process. So very much appreciate it. And hopefully you're preparing Atlanta parents, staff, and students for the future of voting, but we'll see. So thanks for that, and appreciate the clarification. I didn't know my question was going to spur other questions, but I'm glad I asked it.
But I do have to say, to have 1,000 votes already cast on the first day, I think that's a new tie for us. I mean, a new record.
Yeah,
it's a new record for us. So 1,000 votes cast in just one day, and where the day is not even over, is tremendous. So we usually have higher voter turnout than some citywide elections, but it just depends on which elections are happening.
Ooh, burn.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge.
No,
I'm challenging people to turn out the vote.
We are the model for voting.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge.
This is people are excited. So any kind of voting this year, people are voting. So that's a good thing. That is a good thing. Hopefully that momentum will continue into the future.
Jason,
any other questions from?
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know.
Go ahead.
If anybody else has a question, I don't see anyone else's hand up, but
no.
I looked on my schools where I need to go vote. Is it also kind of a record turnout for the candidates that you have? I feel like there's really a lot of candidates in my two schools that I get to vote for. And there typically is, but I feel like this time there's a lot. Like, I always feel like it was a good showing, but this time I felt in both of my schools that there was a really strong showing. So I was curious to know if that's true throughout the district, if more and more people are getting engaged.
Thank you for that question. This year and last year, we had a lot of parents and staff members. I think the more we understand the process, the more we continue to educate and learn about the charter system and the engagement, we will see more parents and staff members raising their hands to participate in the process.
Thank you.
And that's good to hear. Any other questions? One more question, because I want to make sure as we're talking about this election that there is no voter fraud happening. So is it one vote per parent or one vote per household? I think I know the answer to that, but just trying to make sure.
It's thank you, Chairman Estevez. It's one vote per household.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm glad I did not vote yet, because I need to check with my wife. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Kingsmith and Ms. Barnett. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Chair Estevez.
Oh, no, it's you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I was waiting. Again, so thank you to both of you for the presentation, Dr. Kingsmith and Ms. Barnett. For our second presentation, I would like to ask Ms. Rachel Sprecher, Executive Director of Partnership and Development, to update the board on our partnerships. And while Ms. Sprecher is preparing for the presentation and comes online, I want to express my sincerest gratitude to all of our partners, especially those who brought additional support in the wake of a global pandemic. There were many, and we were most appreciative. Ms. Sprecher can provide more details, and we are ready for her presentation. Ms. Sprecher, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Herring. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Good afternoon, Superintendent Herring, Chairman Estevez, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you the 2020 Office of Partnerships and Development update. Next slide, please. The purpose of today's presentation is to provide an overview of our office's work and updates from the last year. How we will do that is an overview of who we are, a summary of the services we provide, a snapshot of our school year 1920 impact and our vision for the future. And the administration's takeaway is that our office continues to provide financial and in-kind support for district and school needs. Next slide. So as you know, the Office of Partnerships and Development is focused on matching unfunded strategic priorities with external resources to alleviate critical needs and gaps for our schools and students. And we also serve as the liaison between the district and our external partners. We have some key ways that we serve our school system, and those include proactively creating and engaging with long-standing strategic relationships, equitably distributing and maximizing partnerships and resources to schools, acting as thought partners for our central office colleagues by helping them to access resources to further their work and offset general funds. So essentially, we are very much generalists throughout the district that help our partners navigate our district to the right places and help our schools develop strong partnerships. Next slide, please. And some examples about how we do this. Having a partnerships office inside of a school district is somewhat a unique and emerging field. So it's not always straightforward to explain what we do and the value that we provide. So I wanted to share kind of this broad overview of who we are. So we are relationship builders. That means creating strategic alliances both inside and outside our district with central office and school-based colleagues, as well as our external partners like nonprofit organizations, corporations, philanthropic foundations, government agencies, community groups, collaboratives, and more. We are also consultants and collaborators in the sense that we share best practices about partnerships from what we've learned collectively over the last several years with both our internal and external staff. An example of this includes thought partnering with the Office of Schools and Academics about how they might fundraise for literacy professional development or purchasing more books for kids, or we might advise a funder about how they should approach a new grant-making effort around STEM. We are storytellers in that we tell our external partners about the incredible work of our teachers and students so they can become champions of our school district. We are matchmakers, connecting resources that we learn about or discover and using our institutional knowledge about our schools and students to make the perfect fit. A recent example of this was matching the Georgia Tech Aerospace College with Tuskegee Airmen Global Academy for a new program. And finally, we are fiscal agents. We coordinate monetary donations that come into the district, managing them effectively and stewarding them as directed. And we also oversee the APS Foundation, the Atlanta Partners for Education. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit now about our core business, which is that we act as the central point of contact for partner requests and inquiries, and like to think of ourselves as that gatekeeper, the first line of defense, and then helping our schools and partners navigate the process. We provide a variety of services in both the partnership work and the development work of our office. Next slide. So here's a little bit about what we provide. It's a lot of information, but I think it helps paint the picture of how we can support our schools with their partnerships and development. So we do grant writing, research and prospecting, stewardship and cultivation of donors, building relationships and networking, ongoing communication and follow-up with our partners to keep them engaged. We have a consulting protocol with our internal colleagues to help build their capacity for fundraising, provide resources and opportunities to our internal stakeholders. We're community collaborators and represent APS on various boards and committees. We try to understand the needs of our school district and schools so we can share them widely, managing the process and administrivia, paperwork, policies, MOUs, and technology tools to enhance partnerships. We vet the partners to make sure they're aligned with our strategic plan and our philosophy for children. So we vet all of our partnerships and donations and direct them to the appropriate place, helping our partners navigate the district and make connections. We design and strategize programs with partners and funders, provide technical assistance, training, and toolkit templates to teams, inform and help develop strategy for partner and donor outreach, support district-wide events and programs and priorities, and help with the narrative and storytelling around our partnerships and APS initiatives. Next slide. So this past year was a critical one with, of course, the pandemic, and we can't thank our partners enough for their support. One thing has been very clear, that even though some of the corporate partners especially have been suffering due to industry circumstances, the financial support may have dwindled, but the advocacy support, the champion support, and the interest of helping APS has never been higher. And the next slide, I'll talk about a few of the partnerships that we're really proud of this past school year. So a couple highlights for school year 1920. We brokered a partnership with Coca-Cola to provide an upcycled graduation gown for every graduating senior. So that means every graduating senior in the class of 2020 had a free cap and gown made of recycled Coca-Cola products, courtesy of our partners at the Coca-Cola Company. That was a huge support to alleviate some of the burden of the cost of cap and gowns for many of our families, and it helps the environment. So it was just a win-win all around from our hometown headquartered company, Coca-Cola Company. We also established the Get Our Kids Connected program with Comcast to leverage a partnership where for $300 we could provide a brand new Chromebook and 12 months of Comcast internet for the Internet Essentials program for families. We raised $2 million for this. The distinction of this program and what we did through APS is that these are permanent devices. So these are not district loan devices that students will have to give back. The students can keep these devices forever. And the internet in their home, we are paying for with the donations for at least 12 months, if not longer. We're also, I wanted to say, we're also clearing the bills with that money. So if you have a pre-existing bill that prevents you from signing up for Comcast, we are clearing those bills as well. So it's a very comprehensive program to try to mitigate the digital divide. We secured funding from the Annie E. Casey Foundation to anchor the Chief Equity and Social Justice Officer position. And the Annie E. Casey Foundation also helped us with a micro grant program for Black male achievement in our district. We raised an additional $200,000 for COVID-19 general relief, including food distribution. We set up partnerships with Lyft, Zifty for delivery, I'm a Father First, Hands on Atlanta for volunteers, and Gooder to just support feeding our children during the spring months, setting that up very quickly. We raised over $100,000 to provide backpacks with school supplies, including an SEL item this year, as well as PPE. So students got a mask in their backpacks this year, and that was through a partnership with the Empty Stocking Fund, and we distributed those during Runway Week. We, of course, recruited and mobilized hundreds of volunteers to support the meal production and the distribution, as well as technology distribution. We partnered with the Urban League of Greater Atlanta to launch the Race to Read 2.0 campaign, which is a grant from the Hewlett-Packard Foundation. And our goal is to make Atlanta a city that reads. And you'll be hearing more about that in the coming weeks, trying to encourage our city to read for 20 minutes a day. Just like you drink 8 glasses of water a day, you want to read 20 minutes a day. And we're really excited about that campaign. And we also, of course, have gotten additional funding for our Orton Gillingham program to train every APS teacher that comes into the district in Orton Gillingham, courtesy of the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl and the College Football Playoff Foundation. We secured a significant commitment as well from the Atlanta Committee for Progress for the College and Career Academy. So the pictures that Dr. King Smith showed of all that equipment, that fancy equipment was purchased by funds that came from the Atlanta Committee for Progress. So we thank them for that. And then we secured funding to continue the Relay Graduate School for Education residency program from Redefine Ed. So those are just a glimpse of what we were able to do in 1920. Here is a slide of our partners that were really significant and stood out, and my apologies because this is certainly not exhaustive. So we are grateful for all of our partnerships, but these particular ones I'm highlighting really came through in response to COVID-19. Next slide, please. So for the development side of our office, we're proud that we helped to bring in over $72 million in resources since our inception to support our offset district costs. This chart details the revenue for the last 2 fiscal years by category. So grants represent funding secured from grants from federal, state, and local government funding or from foundations or corporations. I want to note that not all these grants were directly awarded to APS as the lead or fiscal agent. However, all of them benefited APS, and our office's support was needed to ultimately win the grants. Donations represent any cash that is not through grants generously donated to APS and the Atlanta Partners for Education, which is our 501c3 arm. And the in-kind column reflects donated materials, supplies, goods, products, services, and more given to schools and the district. Please note that the totals all represent support to the district and schools as reported to our office, but of course other support certainly does exist. And I do want to acknowledge a question that we got last year from the board which was to show our donations by cluster. We are currently working on scrubbing this data to be able to provide accurate data because we're transferring to a new system, which I'll tell you about, a new tracking system, which I'm going to speak about in a moment. So we'll be able to understand with that system the donations in schools by cluster. And we also are going to work with Tahita Baker-Jones and our new Chief Equity and Social Justice Officer to help us really master equitable distribution of resources. I can say though that we do direct most of our support that comes centrally from our office to schools that are socioeconomically disadvantaged, Title I schools, or schools that tend to be below I-20 based on some research from the Annie Casey Changing the Odds report. So I think if we were to say where most of our donations go, although we do support all our schools, we support a lot in Douglas, Washington, South Atlanta, Farrell, Carver, and Mays, then Jackson, Grady, and North Atlanta. So I look forward to being able to give you correct data on our district and schools, but I did want to acknowledge that question we get a lot. And another question the board has asked historically that I wanted to address is how do we ensure equity by schools and cluster? So currently we do have a system that includes many filters about how we direct our resources. And some of what we consider is school demographics, socioeconomic status, signature program, geography of the school, numbers of partners the school already has, if the school has a foundation of their own or not, and then the leadership and capacity to manage partnerships. So that's what we consider when we're making a match. And like Ms. Barnett mentioned, we too have tiers of support where we categorize our schools like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, about how we lend our support. Next slide. I wanted to quickly showcase our foundation, which is the Atlanta Partners for Education. It's a 501c3 nonprofit that pretty much serves as an option for donors to give to a 501c3. I'm really proud that we recently transitioned to a 2-body board to ensure better fiscal oversight. We revised our bylaws to include that there is in perpetuity a seat for an APS board member and the sitting superintendent. And we also ensure that more board members are from outside the district than inside to avoid conflicts. So you can see here that our board this year includes Corey Forbes-Roberts, who's our chair from Delta Airlines, Ed Chang from Redefine Ed Atlanta, one of our major philanthropic partners, Ishay Collins, vice chair of the Atlanta Board of Education, Jay Cranman, the CEO of Hands On Atlanta, Dr. Lisa Herring, our superintendent, and Katie Kirkpatrick, who's the president and CEO of the Metro Atlanta Chamber. So you can see there are more non-APS board members than APS board members. And then this board is supported by an advisory board that's made up of corporate and nonprofit and philanthropic leaders, including Mercedes-Benz, Home Depot, Wells Fargo, Communities and Schools, the Sartain Lanier Foundation, the Kaiser Permanente, the Alliance Theater, and more. So the advisory board does not have any fiduciary responsibility, but they really serve as thought partners and advocates for us. Historically, in the past, we have used APFE as a fiscal pass-through for funds, or as well as for fundraising for events like the Back to School Bash. But we're really looking forward to working with Dr. Herring to determine the special initiatives that she sees in her administration that are critical for fundraising. Next slide. So for the last part of the presentation, I do want to talk about the future. For the next school year, we have set some ambitious but achievable goals to be a model for effective school and community partnerships. Next slide, please. Here are just a few of the things that we want to do this year. I won't read them all, but I do want to highlight a couple. One is prioritize high quality partnerships. I believe that when we first started our journey as the partnerships office, we would really kind of take anyone that wanted to partner with us, because it was after a time where a lot of partners have withdrawn support. Now we're at the point where everyone seems to be clamoring to want to work with Atlanta Public Schools. So we really want to prioritize high quality partnerships that maybe have a lot of research-based components and have just a really good model to offer our students. We also, I want to highlight, build better systems and tools to support our work. That is that tool I mentioned. It's called Group Trail, and we will give it an APS branded name with the help of our communications experts, but it's going to be kind of like a match.com for our partners and our schools to sort of match together their needs, find what they're looking for, see opportunities, and will help us track our partnerships better. And I can't wait till that is released. And then we are going to aim to establish a partnership fellows program for school-based leaders. So that'll be kind of like an ambassadors program where we empower and build the capacity of someone at each school to manage partnerships and do a great job with those. So those are just a couple of things that we are excited about for the future. Next slide. And then I wanted to take a moment to just kind of highlight our current priorities and the immediate future needs in the virtual learning space. So these are some things that we have seen and heard from our schools and colleagues about what would really help our students right now in this unconventional time. So supplies, of course, even though our students are at home, we want them to have the best tools that they need for their at-home learning environment. So backpacks, even though they're not going to school, we're treating this like school. So backpacks with robust school supplies, SEL items, at-home PE equipment like jump ropes. We want to make sure that they're equipped with what they need. And even though we did the big push with backpacks at the beginning of the school year, we know that our students will continue to need to refresh supplies or re-up on them. So that's currently a need. Technology, as I mentioned, we do have the great program through APS IT where they disseminated laptops, devices and hotspots for every student, but we do want to kind of continue fundraising for Get Our Kids Connected so we can build that permanent solution for kids at home, families at home in their households, and have a computer to own forever, because we believe that access to technology, strong internet is a right, not a privilege. Food support, although there was a recent waiver that just came out from the USDA, what is different now in our food model is that we can only support students if they are low income and if they have registered. So we do see some needs for adults to have food, for some shelf-stable items like groceries and dinner, of course, because we only do breakfast and lunch. So that's more of like a family issue. Health, of course, PPE, although our district has done a great job with getting PPE for all students and staff. I think the more that we can have and stockpile, the better. in case someone loses one or leaves something at home. And then of course, access to testing and telehealth and at-home mental health and physical health services are top of mind just because of the health season that we're in. Childcare, which is in quotation marks because we've been hearing a lot about how can students still thrive, say if their family is or parent is an essential worker or has to go back to work. And so there's many partners who are setting up learning locations for our students to be able to go during the day. And not for childcare, it's for learning, but we don't have a better word for it right now. So that is something that our partners have been doing, like faith-based partners, and we just really want to say thank you for that. Teacher morale and stress is very top of mind, I know, for our superintendent and for others. We are concerned about our teachers. So anything to help them, we've been working on Donors Choose, gift cards or a Zifty gift card to take one meal off their plate or something. But if anyone has any ideas about how we can continue to boost morale and keep our teachers encouraged, and all educators, quite frankly, we will take those. Learning loss is, of course, a big concern and need. So any remedial opportunities, any tutoring and extra support is welcomed, or any innovative ideas about how to combat learning loss and catch our kids up. Social emotional support and healing, I think, goes without saying that everyone has been through a lot of trauma. So that is top of mind. And then, of course, equity-driven initiatives to ensure that our most vulnerable, in need, high need students get just as much support as our more affluent ones. So this is kind of thinking about maybe families that can't afford a private tutor for supplementing our learning instruction. We're really focused on equity. Next slide. And so how can you help with some of those things? This is just a chart and I won't go through everything, but the community can help us with their time, talent, and treasure. So an example for time is you could volunteer with us in a virtual model. There's many tools like TutorMate and BookNook that can help facilitate that. And we can help you guide you through the process of how to be background checked and everything like that. With talent, if you want to help be a champion of APS and share positive stories about what's happening in our virtual classrooms, we would love the support because our teachers, our whole system has really risen to the occasion, and we're so proud of them. So if you see something good, please say something. And then treasure, of course, I mentioned you can donate to get our kids connected. You can fund a teacher's project on Donors Choose, or passively, if you're just shopping on Amazon lately, which I've been doing a lot, you can choose Amazon Smile, the APS Foundation, as your beneficiary, and your percentage will be rounded up to that. Next slide. And who to contact for what. So to get involved, all you need to do is reach out to our office. I handle a lot of district-wide partnerships. Upenda Dubose handles school-based partnerships and really gets to know the needs of the schools. Joy Hunter does grants and fundraising, and Stephanie Collier basically operates our whole entire enterprise. And the way you can get in touch with us is to visit our website for more information. And you can do that by going to atlantapublicschools.us and then going to departments and clicking on the partnerships tab. Next slide. And this is how you get in touch with us: our phone number, our email address, and of course, our social media, our Twitter. This concludes my presentation, although there's a lot I'm just realizing I left out about more exciting things, but I'm gonna stop, and thank you so much, and I will take your questions.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for that. Cynthia, I think I saw your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. And Rachel, that was wonderful.
Oh,
Thank you so much. I learned a lot and I know everybody else watching did as well. And let me just say that this office and what you've done for it have been one of the most significant initiatives that we've undertaken since I've been on the board. This is just it's made a huge difference in the way we run the district and the lives of children and families across the city. So just thank you for the way that you really have taken this and run with it and turned it into such a powerful force within APS and the community. So I want to go back, and I think and I'm sorry, I missed the name of it. You called it Match.com for partnerships?
Yes. Yes, ma'am. It's called Group Trail is the software platform. We want to give it a name that's like APS-ified, like APS Connect or APS Partner Zone or something. But yeah, the platform's called Group Trail, and it's going to serve as like a Match.com for schools and partners.
Okay. Can you give me a timetable on that? Because I think that will actually answer or allow us to answer in future the other couple of questions that I had.
Yes. Upenda Dubose, partnerships manager, has been the project manager on this effort. She's done an amazing job. And she gave me an update today in our team meeting that the launch date will be September 22nd. So very soon.
Good. And that will allow us to track which schools need partners and which partners might be a best fit for a school.
That's correct.
Okay. And is one of the goals of that to eliminate our not knowing that a school doesn't have a partner and wants one?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because we have quiet little schools that don't ask sometimes, and we're not aware of needs. And I came to this meeting having looked at this presentation at getting ready to ask you to find a way that we can reach out to schools or classrooms that may not have partners and may need them, but don't know how to ask or have not been able to ask. And it sounds like you just did that. So once again, thank you very much.
Certainly. And I do think that, the Partnerships Ambassadors program that I described is going to help with that a lot, because we're going to have someone key at each school who's going to be able to tell us about needs or let us know if indeed they feel like they've been overlooked. And I think this platform will really automate it for us, because we do a good job, I think, with a small team of 4 to have that institutional knowledge about like where we last gave something to, or, who's partnering where and stuff. But as you can imagine, for 90 schools, it is a lot. So I think what you described is going to be, it's just going to benefit us all by having this platform to make sure that we don't do that anymore.
Okay. And one more thing, and I confess I haven't looked, so this may be an obvious answer. Have we or can we feature the contact information for your office front and center on the website, so that as individuals or organizations contact me or others, we can refer them there directly?
I don't see why not. I'm happy to put that there. And it's just a matter of working with our team in communications to do that, or if the superintendent says it's okay to do that.
I'd like us to consider that. I know I've been personally approached by some potential partners and have had to struggle a little bit to figure out exactly where to route them. Mm-hmm. And if we make it easier, then we may find that more needs get met.
Thank you for the feedback and the questions.
That's all.
And Cynthia, I think a good rule of thumb, I always connect folks to Rachel, whether they are connected or whether they're a good fit or not for Rachel's team. If it's not something for her, she'll definitely connect them with the right person. But she's always a good place to start. Her team is always a good place to start with those kind of questions where you don't quite know where to connect folks and how to connect folks. She is a connector. She's a bridge builder. So I'm not going to say she's one of my favorites. I got in trouble last year when I said that her team was my favorite team. So I won't say it this year. Not that it's not
y'all
my
have been
favorite,
very responsive.
Yep. Michelle?
Thank you for the presentation. I'm really excited about how your department's developing and getting more strategic with respect to how to align resources to schools and support. With respect to the ambassador position that you're talking about, who are you looking at the school levels to support those positions? I feel like we ask a lot of our school administrators as it is. And so I'm just kind of curious to know, is that the business manager? And if a school doesn't have a business manager, is that the parent liaison? And, you know, how are you going to help balance what I would think is already a workload with, you know, bringing on this additional support, which I believe is needed. I just am curious to know how you're seeing that come together.
Certainly. Thank you, Board Member Olympiadis, for the question. So we've talked a lot about this internally on our team. We think we're going to model it after a couple other really good ambassador programs that already exist in our district. For example, there is the communications ambassador position, and human resources has teacher ambassadors, I think, that help with recruitment for other teachers. So I think where we landed is we'll leave it up to the school, because it varies school by school. Some schools it actually might be the principal that really wants to be in this role because they're passionate about partnerships, or maybe they're an alumni of the district, so it's personal for them. But I do see it mostly as a school business manager role, just because they already kind of de facto take on the function of partnerships. As well as like a teacher leader position. I think a teacher leader would be great if they're looking for the next level or aspirations. I think it could be a parent liaison for sure. It could be a para-educator. So the way that we're going to roll it out is really going to be kind of it's not going to be like a mandate. It'll be more of just like a who do you think could manage? We'll set the expectations, and then we'll just kind of hope that each school nominates the best fit for them.
Got it. Thank you so much for the explanation.
Rachel, can you wait a second? Pierre, if you can move Leslie over to a panelist. I think she has a question, but I almost missed her because she's not in the room. Leslie, did you have a question?
Thank you for that. I just wanted to make a quick comment. I really do appreciate the presentation, Rachel. I'm grateful that you're looking at a system to help do the equity alignment, and very grateful that you are now concentrated back with one job in partnerships and development. Thank you all for all that you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Board Member Grant.
All right, and then Rachel, can you put or maybe it's not Rachel, it's Linda. Can you put the table back on? I think it's the next to last slide, maybe, that has what people can do. Keep going back. That one. Yes. So I just want to reiterate this slide. I really appreciate Rachel putting it together. I want this to stay up while Ishay asks her question. Ishay?
Hey, thanks. Sorry about that. I was trying to juggle screens really quickly. But yeah, no, Jason, you just you just pointed to what I was going to say to put the last slide up, and just wanted to again echo Leslie and thanking Rachel and the team on all the work they've done to streamline processes and sitting on the AFEB board over seeing the evolution of it has just been really great work. And I know in regards to listening to the idea in regards to the the matching pieces. I remember when I joined, we were first elected years ago, and I know there was some concerns about the magnitude and the capacity of managing the requests and matching them with the schools. But I do think Rachel and the team has really built out a solid platform just to kind of make it accessible to everyone. It's been great work. It's been great work with just great response from from the community and just wanting to give to APS. So definitely want to thank Rachel and the team for all the great work that they're doing to to manage it all. This definitely has been a different it's definitely have been a different ebb and flow and feedback than in the past and I think most of the board members we recall when we first came on board that there was issues about organizations donating to APS and then those services or gifts not being actually given implemented to the schools or in a proper time. Nothing I think it was just a lot more. We received a lot more complaints about the impact of the community impact in trying to help APS. So I'm just glad to see all of the great work that is happening because it is benefiting a lot of the communities that Erica and I serve. And we're now, I'm getting the calls from parents and community members just thanking, and particularly right now as we are trying to close the digital divide and make sure that all of our children have devices, now getting those calls of just thanking the district for the support. So Rachel, I know that's contributed to you and your team, and just wanted to, to show our appreciation for you for that. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. If that's it, thank you so much, y'all. Thank you, Rachel. And yeah, if the public would like to help Atlanta Public Schools, please take a look at the slide. And if you have any questions, please reach out to Rachel and her team. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And then again, thank you, Chair Estevez. A great job in the presentation. And for our next presentation, I want to invite Dr. Katika Lovett, our Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, to present our information that we have committed to the public that provides a COVID-19 public health data update. When we announced that we would be starting the year with a virtual instruction model for at least the first 9 weeks, I also explained that the district would provide health data checkpoints every month to guide whether we would remain virtual or move into face-to-face instruction or a hybrid model. So today marks the first checkpoint. Again, today's presentation from Dr. Lovett is a checkpoint, which allows for us to share with the community publicly what we currently have as it relates to public health data. Dr. Lovett, we are ready for your report and today's first checkpoint.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Herring. Good afternoon, Chairman Estevez and members of the Board of Education, as well as our community members who are tuning in. I'm excited to jump right into the public health data, so we'll go to the next slide at this time. Okay, so here's our agenda. Essentially, this is our opportunity to provide a public health data checkpoint regarding COVID-19 and an overview of some of the information or some of the data points that we use to guide our decision-making, and particularly our decision-making as we think about the next phase of the district's reopening plan. You have in front of you here the roadmap. We'll talk a little bit about the tools and the guidance that we've received that undergirds our decision-making. We'll also talk about COVID-19 specifically in Fulton County, as we have in the past, and we'll also talk about COVID-19 among school-aged children today. The takeaway at the end of the presentation is that APS remains committed to the health and safety of our students, staff, and families, and we are continuing to stay abreast of the COVID-19 trends in collaboration with our local and state public health officials. Let's go to the next slide. So I'll start here just bringing us back to this tool, which you've seen a few times now. This is really the tool that we've said has helped to guide our decision making. And the box that is across the top, notice it actually is the level of community spread. And I know that is a point that we talk about often. I'll talk about the level of community spread in just a moment. But we start there when we think about how we're going to approach the instructional model, which follows after that. You know that we have been in that place of substantial spread. And so we made that decision to begin the year in a virtual or distance remote learning environment. As we continue to watch the trends with COVID-19, we will be coming back to this information to see what are the other options that exist for us. And so today you'll hear more about the trends as it relates to what we've seen since that point in July and August and where we are now. And that may give you some indication as to some other options we may be considering in the next few weeks. Next slide. I wanted to start by sharing some updated guidance. We know since we began this process back in the summer, there has been several pieces of information that have been released. And the one that has come out most recently is from the Department of Public Health. And this is a very important guide. I wanted to just stop and put this up first. This is the guidance that really helps schools in thinking about how we can make sure that schools are safe when our children return. And so they've called it a toolkit, and this is available on the Department of Public Health's website, as well as our health alerts on our APS site. But the toolkit includes some guidance that is both required for school districts and some other things that are recommended, as well as some additional information for families and students, information for school districts to help us in decision making, as well as info for our healthcare providers. So I wanted to just stop and share this piece of information because it is also a very important tool that is helping to guide our decision making as we consider how we'll progress to the next phase of instruction here in APS. Next slide. Okay, so we'll start with COVID-19 cases. And again, we're going to jump right into Fulton County as we start looking at cases here. Next slide. I'll start with the levels of community spread. And again, you've heard me mention that statement, I think, a few times in these presentations, but the level of community spread is the measure of the COVID-19 incidence rates that's reported by local and state public health officials, and it's based on a rate of new diagnoses over a 14-day period. The important piece to remember here about the levels of community spread is that it's not a single snapshot of time. It's not one day that determines where we are in terms of that level of spread. It is really looking at 14 days and considering the information that follows below. So substantial spread, over 100 cases per 100,000 residents within a county. Mild and moderate, you can see 6 to 100. And then that wonderful place of low and no spread, 1 to 5 cases per 100,000 residents. And I want to just state right here that this is looking at the rate of new diagnoses over that time period. So we're not looking at the cumulative number. When we look at the cumulative number, we know that we have well over 100 cases, you know, if you start to break that number down. But this is looking at the rate of new diagnoses over the 14-day period. Next slide. So here you have the levels of community spread for Fulton County. So I'll start with the information on the right. A couple weeks ago, I actually had an opportunity to pull this information down. And again, this is all available on the Georgia Department of Public Health's website. But we had an opportunity to just look at where we were at that time in terms of the level of community spread. And you can see here for Fulton County as of August 19th, in terms of cases per 100K, there was 291. 291 as of August 19th was the number. And if you look at that number compared to what we've just stated around levels of community spread, that was solidly still in the place of substantial spread of the disease. If you look on the left-hand side, you will see September the 1st. And September 1st, we actually looked at the information again to get a more accurate or more up-to-date number for Fulton County. And we did see some promising trends, if you will. The data, while it is not yet out of the place of substantial, it is still moving in the right direction. And you can see for cases per 100,000, there were 200 cases. So still, again, in the level of substantial, but starting to see a trend, and hopefully a trend that continues, where we are moving towards fewer and fewer cases over a 2-week cycle. Next slide. So I wanted to talk a bit about age distribution, and particularly as we have returned to school, wanted to do a little bit of a deeper dive into who are the persons in our community who are being diagnosed with COVID-19. And here you can see the information. It's a very colorful chart, but I want to point out the bar that's across the very top. And that bar across the top, which is that bright kind of royal blue, indicates the cases for school-age children, basically individuals who are under the age of 19. The important piece about noting this is if you start back in March and continue all the way through August the 30th, you can see that there started to be an upward trend of children who are being diagnosed with COVID-19. Later in the presentation, I'll go a little bit deeper as it relates to children, but I wanted to just point this piece out so that we can start to see the percentage of cases and where it falls as it relates to children versus adults. It is still very much true that the majority of COVID-19 cases in Fulton County are adults. They are not children, but they are adults. But I wanted you to see that that trend did actually indicate some growth for school-age children. Next slide. And here we have the racial distribution of COVID-19 cases in Fulton County. And again, you can see this trend as well, which very much looks like national trends and even the state trends, where we see that certain groups of individuals, particularly people who are African American and Black, have the higher numbers, followed by our individuals who are white. You can see Hispanic, Asian, so on and so forth. But these trends are the same trends that we see again on the national level and on the state level, and important trends for us to think about as we think about our racial demographics here in Atlanta Public Schools. So that's why this information is something that we also pull out and consider in terms of decision making and wanted to share. Next slide, please. Okay, now here's another piece of information I don't think we've had an opportunity to share before, but this is confirmed cases by zip code and school clusters. Now this includes both children and adults. So this is both children and adults. And you can see the circular or kind of the red circle that I've added here. And this loosely captures Atlanta Public Schools, right? It loosely captures Atlanta Public Schools. You have the respective zip codes off to the right. But in looking within our circle, you can see that there are some areas, some zip codes in particular, where there's a darker green. And that darker green indicates that those have the highest numbers of confirmed cases per 100,000. So we do have a few zip codes here in APS that when you compare to the entire county of Fulton are at that highest level. So as you get closer to the darker green, that indicates higher levels of confirmed cases per 100,000 in the particular zip codes. Next slide. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the city of Atlanta and particularly APS. We'll go to the next slide at this time. I'll start here with the City of Atlanta's reopening dashboard. And again, this is a slide that you may be familiar with. We have shared it in previous presentations. This slide is important not because it captures levels of community spread. That's not the intent of this particular slide, but this gives us an opportunity to really look at how COVID-19 is progressing throughout the community and what are some of those other indicators that are showing us whether or not the virus is starting to level off or if it is continuing to grow or if we have a handle on how we are able to respond to the virus here in the city of Atlanta. So I'll start with the information on the left-hand side and you can see new COVID cases. If you look at current trend and then the target that the city has set forth, you can see that the new COVID cases actually were trending in the yellow. So that's a very positive or a very hopeful indicator in terms of new COVID cases just within the city of Atlanta. If you look at the 7-day average, and then if you look at the current trend being 19 days of a trend in the right direction. Now looking at hospitalizations has not yet met the target for the city, which is 14 days, but hospitalizations is starting to trend in the right way as well with 10 days where we have seen those numbers going down. And then finally, the average percentage of positive test results also showing some very, I hate to say positive, but very good signs, if you will, trending in the right direction with 18 days of the average percentage of test results being in the yellow. On the right-hand side, these are hospital capacity indicators, and you can also see a check mark there Again, very promising news for the city of Atlanta. And finally, the testing indicators also being in the yellow zone. So this basically, when you look at this information and pulling out the city of Atlanta from Fulton County, you can see some very hopeful trends there. We're not yet out of the weeds or out of substantial spread overall, but we do see some promise when we look at the information and start digging deeper into the city of Atlanta. Next slide. Okay, this information I'm very excited to share. This is the distribution of COVID-19 cases among our students. These are pediatric cases by gender, age, and race. The information that is highlighted to the left, the orange column, if you will, indicates Atlanta Public Schools. That is the city of Atlanta. And then everything else that's to the right of that, that is not highlighted, really corresponds to Fulton County School Zone. And finally, all Fulton is the percentage that is there on the right-hand side in the green. So I want to take a moment and just break down this information a little bit for you, because I thought it was rather enlightening when we start looking at just pediatric cases and just students and children. So as of date, or as of the date of this particular report, which was 9/2, there were 676 cases within the city of Atlanta that have impacted children. And that is a very important point to pull out. When you compare that number to all of Fulton, you can see that for all of Fulton, there were 2,225. So slightly around about 30% or so being right here in the city of Atlanta when you look at the all number. In terms of the age, if you start looking at the age breakdown, you see here that for students starting maybe at the age 5, there were 13.4% of that number, 676, 18% from 11 to 14, and then 15 to 18, which are typically our high school population. About 57% of the persons who were diagnosed and who were children fell into that particular age range. Underneath that information, you do see the breakdown again by race and ethnicity as well. And this follows a trend similar to what we saw in looking at the all category. But I wanted you to have an opportunity to see this again from the perspective of children and how the virus is trending amongst our students and children throughout the community. Next slide. Okay, this is another very interesting piece of information. And this, I should say, all of the data sources are listed here on the slides, but in working with our partners in the Board of Health, they're excited to receive pediatric epidemiology reports, which give us the opportunity to dig deeper in preparation for our public health information today. So you can see here in looking at cases by school clusters and zones, if you look at the size of the circle, it gives you an indication as to the number of cases by high school zones. And it's not labeled here. Fulton County doesn't label it in that way. But if you look at the number, look at the circles that are all blue, those represent Atlanta Public Schools. And so if you consider the all blue information, Atlanta Public Schools, you can see that just north to the north, which would be our North Atlanta cluster, we have a higher number there of new cases. And that's just the number of cases within these last from August 11th to the 24th of new pediatric cases. Again, not a cumulative number overall, but just to give you an indication from that particular time frame, how many of the cases that were new fell into our individual school clusters. And so that is another piece of information that we are considering as we are going about decision-making here in the district. Next slide. Okay, here's another way to look at age distribution. I talked about a moment ago that we had a relatively higher number of students who fell into the 15 to 18 age bracket who were diagnosed with COVID-19. But this also gives you an opportunity to look at the information beginning in March and watching the trends all the way through August the 30th. So if you're looking at the trends in cases and how often students were being diagnosed or children were being diagnosed with COVID-19, you see that during the summer months, right around July, I would say July right up until now, we had a pretty significant number of folks who were getting tests done for children, which is a positive thing. We want more folks to do the testing. And we also saw more positive cases. So if you look here, you'll see again, those trends being relatively higher in the summer months and 15 to 18 being the age bracket where they were the highest. We are encouraged though, however, by the fact that as the dates progressed, we started to see the trend level off a bit. So we do believe that that indicates for us that the level at which students are being found to be positive right now is starting to level off. And hopefully that's an indicator that we are seeing some good momentum here in the community in terms of being able to manage and respond to COVID. Next slide. Here's another way of looking at that same information. This is just by percentages. Again, the highest percentage is the yellow bar there, and it's that 15 through 18 group. And you also see followed by 5 to 10-year-olds being the next highest percentage if you go to the bar all the way to the right, which is the most recent information. You'll see the percentage of cases. Next slide. Okay, so in going through all of the information, and I know it was just a snapshot, if you will, because the COVID information is constantly moving and there's so much information that could be shared. But in summarizing what we've had an opportunity to show you today, the rates of COVID-19 continue to show increases, definitely within the state of Georgia and within Fulton County. Given the current data and the 14-day trends, we are still at the place of substantial spread. But I do want to say again that we are encouraged, at least by what we're starting to see in terms of how the virus is progressing. We know the holiday that just happened, we have to really watch that over the next few weeks to get a better picture. But at least to date, we are very encouraged by the numbers that we saw. The racial distribution I've shared with you as well. Approximately 50% of new diagnoses are African American, followed by 30% white and 15% Hispanic. Next slide. A little more information to summarize the pediatric lens as it relates to COVID-19. As of August 31st, Fulton County had 24,894 cases, and that's across Fulton County. But of those cases, 2,225 were amongst children aged 0 to 18, which is approximately 9% of all cases to date in Fulton County. And of the 2,225 cases among children, 60% were Fulton County and about 30%, as I mentioned a moment ago, were here in Atlanta Public Schools. There are about 10% that have unknown district locations. The other piece to note in terms of the COVID amongst children is that for those children 0 to 18, there were about 32, and these are actual numbers, 32 who required hospitalization, 1 who was intubated or required some form of respiratory assistance, and then 5 who were admitted to ICU, and unfortunately 1 student or 1 child who died as of the date of this information. Amongst the students who were diagnosed with COVID, it's also important to see this piece here. I know we talk about COVID showing up and being both symptomatic and asymptomatic, but this is a very important point. 33% of the children who were reported to have COVID, who were found to have COVID per Fulton County, reported no symptoms. 33% reported no symptoms. And amongst younger children, 5 to 10 years old, 44% had no symptoms. So that's an important point as we think about how the virus is showing up. It is still very much asymptomatic and symptomatic, highly symptomatic, but there's also a great population of students for whom there may be no symptoms. And finally, the analysis that I've shared in terms of the public school district information, this is just a statement from Fulton County. This does not take into account actual school attendance. This is looking at residential addresses and the associated zone schools or the zone district for that information. Okay, next slide. All right, and this is our final slide. So something that I mentioned again, while the city of Atlanta metrics show improvement overall, and we did see some improvement or some things move into that place of the yellow, we know that national public health warnings, as well as other warnings regarding states with high positivity in cases, indicate a need for ongoing efforts to really be, aggressive in how we're addressing community spread. And so we're continuing to see that be the case here in the city of Atlanta. We're not out of the weeds yet. We are still very much in substantial spread, but wanted to just share that piece here. We see some improvement, but we're going to continue the efforts, as is the city of Atlanta. And then one piece I wanted to just kind of end with, I think is a highlight. The Department of Public Health, along with the Georgia Department of Education, are now requiring that there is a reporting mechanism from school districts directly to the state. And as a part of those efforts, that information will now be something that will be shared publicly via our website. So we're very excited that that info will be forthcoming. We are working to come up with what exactly that will look like, but that is something that will be coming out where we'll be able to report the information concerning cases that impact APS, and you can see them in live time on our website. So very excited about that. And again, more information will be forthcoming. So finally, as the landscape changes, we will continue our efforts towards all things monitoring, towards all things sharing, And I look forward to the opportunity to share our next public health update, which is scheduled for August the 5th. That is October, thank you. It took a few months, October, thank you, Dr. Herring. But I believe that concludes the presentation. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lovett. So to summarize your summary, essentially we're headed in the right direction.
It appears.
But we're going to see what Labor Day brings us. And based on what I've heard, we need to wait about 14 to 21 days to see what the impact of Labor Day was. I know that there was a lot of social distancing going on in my circles, but I also realized that as I drove around the city, not every circle is my circle. And there are lots of people who are not socially distancing. So we'll see how the numbers progress, but they were certainly headed in the right direction.
Yes, we
Are there
believe so.
questions from board members? Michelle?
So just to be clear, we're still holding to our 9 weeks of virtual learning as part of this communication update, or are we looking to make another? I don't know what, I can't recall when the next update is. Or is the next update in this 2 to 3 week time period? I'm starting to get feedback from people as other counties are phasing in various levels. What is our plan on doing so? And so I looked at this update earlier, and this is all very health related, and I wanted to know what particularly we're looking at as the administrative team of where we are, what we're doing with the 9 weeks of virtual.
Okay. Dr. Herring, would you like to address it, or?
No, I'll start, and if I omit anything, by all means, feel free to compliment. And so thank you for the question, Board Member Olympiadis. As of this presentation, we still maintain our virtual instructional model. We are aware that there are questions, and of course that our neighboring districts are also starting to entertain a phased-in approach to returning back with a variation of dates. I want to remind us that when we announced the virtual instructional model back in July and also into August, we also maintained our responsibility to look at a tiered approach that would at some point allow for us to consider, as we move from substantial spread to moderate spread, a revisiting of a hybrid model. I want to say with a great deal of certainty that we still have a blueprint for that model that we can entertain, and it has a tiered approach. That tiered approach does entertain a cohort of students that we would consider first. That first level of consideration would be our early learners, pre-K through second, our special needs and ESOL population, and depending upon the circumstance, potentially transition grades. We are not saying today that that is something that we are ready to transition to, but I am sharing that our district has been proactive in establishing a plan to execute just that. Based on the data that Dr. Lovett has shared, and I think it is important because as we are not only observing what is happening across greater Atlanta, but even across the state, there were districts who chose to also simply open face-to-face fully, which is certainly their option. For us within Atlanta Public Schools, we choose today to still maintain the need to be virtual. You asked two questions that I want to clarify. October 5th is the next update that we will provide based on the health data checkpoint. I think the other clarification is, and help me with this one, Dr. Lovett, we talked about this earlier. Between now and October 5th, how much of the 9 weeks does that capture? In other words, will October 5th complement the conclusion of a 9-week model so that at that window we might be able to say something otherwise, if not earlier? October 5th will capture a total how many weeks for us, the simple math, between day one, which was
probably about 7 weeks.
It's about 6 or 7 weeks because the 9 weeks ends on October 23rd. That is the last day of the 9 weeks. So if we back that up a bit, it's about 3 weeks short of the 9 weeks.
And so
about 6 or 7 weeks.
Thank you. And so finally, what I want to say in complement to that, and also the importance of the public health data, is that as we see this trend, which is encouraging and could potentially continue to decrease, it gives us a bit more confidence around the potential of considering the hybrid model between now and the close of a 9-week cycle. But I would dare not say today that that's something we would do immediately, because I think we do need to watch that as we are still within the pandemic. And I hope that that answers your question, but if not, by all means, please ask me to clarify.
No, I appreciate the October 5th date. I didn't have the data from when y'all showed it last time. I guess it was last month. I didn't pull out that PowerPoint to go back and see. One other question: in part of my district, in District 3, we have bits of DeKalb County. Are we watching those numbers as well? And potentially in the future, can we share those numbers for that? That's the, there's a little bit of the Grady cluster, and you know, a majority of the half, I guess a good half of the Jackson cluster, or the old Crim cluster over in East Atlanta and Kirkwood and that part of the area.
Yes.
So I guess that's a resounding yes.
But yes, I just want to make sure we're inclusive of everyone. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Were there other questions?
Cynthia?
Yeah, just another one that I keep getting from constituents, from parents, and just would kind of like you to reiterate the answer. And that is, when we begin thinking about transitioning to in-person learning in some form, will that be a system-wide decision, or will we consider cluster by cluster or school by school based on the data?
Thank you. I will speak with clarity in this, as we have been thinking about that return. So we certainly have not paused that. From the very beginning, we've looked at more than just the virtual model. But to answer your question as well, Board Member Briscoe Brown, our intent is to suggest a return that is district-wide. As it relates to the transition of a hybrid model or full face-to-face, based on what we believe would be in the best interest of our staff and students from not only a health perspective, but also for instructional consistency.
Thank you. And I did not mean to imply that you were not working on plans for returning. I know that you and the administration and our staff are working night and day, and that we have a whole variety of possible plans based on the data and the conditions as we find them, when we feel like we're able to do that. So I know that y'all have used this time, both this fall and even this summer, to put together a whole menu of plans.
Yes, ma'am.
And that as soon as we feel like we are safe and that we can keep our children and our families and our employees safe using one of those plans, that we'll be looking at that as soon as we can in October, after the 9 weeks.
Thank you. Yes.
Leslie?
Thank you. I wonder if it'd be possible just to, I know that different ones of us get different communications from parents that sometimes email all of us, sometimes one. If we could have a common protocol about the response to this specific question, parents who are demanding us to go back tomorrow, and or parents who are just sending in their thoughts about the practices. But if we have maybe a real quick FAQ that could be put up on the main, circular or something, so that we can point parents directly there. This is when our 9-week period is up that we committed to. This is, when our next check is, just those hard pieces of information, so that, we're not crafting responses or having to go look for stuff. As individual board members, I know I would appreciate that. So, thanks.
Board Member Grant, I think that's a very good, I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Is that, no, I'm sorry. I'm managing some stuff on my road trip. Okay.
It sounds like she's in a room like
I'm on on my way to Charles.
She's like an operator. It sounds like there's phone calls going on in the background. She's connecting the wires.
I have my
Go ahead, Doctor.
headset on. Go ahead, Dr. Herring.
We can do that. And so I was actually thanking you. I think that's a very good request. And I will get with the team, Dr. Levitt and I and the full team, and work to have something to that level of completion for those FAQs.
Thanks. Great. Appreciate it.
So, Dr. Herring, how long will the district need to ramp up and convert into whatever hybrid model? So, as parents anticipate, for example, Cobb County announced that they're going back, but their announcement was about a month beforehand because I don't think they're going back until October, although they've announced that they're going back. And then other school districts have, announced we're going back next week, and they're going back. How much lead-in time can parents expect in anticipation of the end of the next 9 weeks? Is it going to be a 1 week heads up, 2 weeks heads up, 1 month heads up? What does that look like?
So I appreciate that question, Board Chair Estevez. That is the right question. And so at best, as I can say this with accuracy, it would be our goal to give at best a 3 to 4 week window of advance notice to our parents and to our community. I would also tie into that there's a dual dynamic that occurs in that space, which means if we're entertaining that also means we would be engaging internally with our principals, with our district staff in terms of preparedness, so that we would have a high level of confidence to say, if 2 to 3 weeks from now, we were forecasting out 3 to 4 weeks from now, we would be, and we are by the way, engaging now internally around what those scenarios of preparation and preparedness look like. We've been doing that for some time, and we're also monitoring the numbers. The short answer is 3 to 4 weeks out, so that parents could absolutely have time to prepare. And in addition to that, working on what our internal district would need to be aware of in order for us to facilitate that level of transitioning.
Okay. And then I know you mentioned that in terms of coming back, when we do come back, there is a phased in approach that the district will likely take, which means early grade parents, students with special needs, students who are ESOL or ELL. If the numbers continue to improve, so what is the earliest that we would be able to go back to face-to-face to start that phase-in approach? What I'm hearing is the next update is on October 5th, so the earliest would be 3 weeks after that.
The earliest could very well be that. I see you, Dr. Levitt. Did you want to say, or were you just head nodding in that regard? Your head nodding, yeah. And that would be the earliest, all things considered, Chair Estevez, all things considered. That could be the earliest, just knowing that I'd hate to overpromise and underdeliver in that regard. But just based on what I just shared, that could, and could is an important word, could be. We're watching, so we've already suggested that we see the trend. We know that we will see what Labor Days, what the data will reveal from Labor Day, and how we will continue to monitor and adjust accordingly from that. We are already and have been internally looking at what are the challenges and opportunities that we need to consider now, between now and the next several weeks, leading into the month of October. What I would say is that if there was, in any level of likelihood that it absolutely would fall into the month of October. More than likely the latter part. If there was some likelihood for it to be earlier, we would still want to take heed to the appropriate amount of advance notice that would need to go to families. And that should still be grounded in a tiered approach to phase that in. Just by virtue, I mean, unless there was some outstanding, significant transition that occurred where we felt that full face-to-face was worth consideration. But I would never try to speak to that with a grand idea, not knowing all of the other potential variables that need to be weighted in on that.
And if there was something earlier, then that would likely require a special called meeting to discuss that. But that's
Yes,
also
sir. Yes, sir.
okay. Aretta and then Cynthia.
Hello, thank you for this information. I just want to point out, just from what we've heard, that sounds like a great incentive to all to continue to socially distance and to wash hands and to be extra careful, because the more that we do what we're supposed to do, the sooner we can get back into our classrooms.
Absolutely. And if I may respond to that, Board Member Baldwin, I have in the encounters and in the communications that we've received from parents and students alike, and I want to be clear, I hear from students as well directly. I want to acknowledge that we are aware of where there are frustrations and the desire for us to hurry back. But I also want to acknowledge the feedback that we've also received from parents who've not only been appreciative, they are doing their best to manage, and they have also expressed that for as long as we are in this space, it wasn't as bad as they thought. And so there's a great level of consideration in both of those arenas. And I also think I have a responsibility just as an educator to say, this entire experience should have an impact on all of us to think about what is the future of schooling? You know, how will school continue to look? There are secondary and elementary students who love this virtual model. And of course, there are those who are just the opposite for various reasons. And we recognize that our job is to work to figure out how do we ensure rigor and integrity in that process regardless. But if this pandemic's disruption has done nothing, it has brought to our attention the need to pay attention to all of the barriers and all of the opportunities that have emerged. I understand that that's fine in hearing it, but that where we currently sit, the bottom line question is, how soon can we anticipate the opportunity to re-engage in the face-to-face model, whether that's phased or full? So that is top of mind for us.
Cynthia?
Yeah, I'm sorry to go back over this ground again, but even I'm confused right now. We have said that we will be all virtual through October 23rd. Are we holding to that as of this moment?
As of this moment, the answer is yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is it possible that we could go back to some form of in-person learning earlier than that date? And the reason I'm trying to make this clear is because this is like one of the top 3 questions that we keep getting asked. And I thought one of the reasons that we had decided that we would not go back, that we were announcing all virtual for that first 9 weeks, was to be able to inject some degree of certainty into this process. And if we're now going back on that, I want to know that so that we can make that clear.
I would like to clarify that it's not that we're going back on that. I appreciate that question, Board Member Briscoe Brown. We are talking about just the potential scenarios, the hypotheticals of what could occur. As of today, we are still wedded to that 9-week window. Per the question that Chair Estevez asked, if there was any likelihood based on a continued decline, where would that potentially occur? And I shared it would still have to be within the month of October, but that's all very much hypothetical based on what information we're able to gauge week by week, and obviously every 14 days based on public health data. For clarity today, we are still wedded to the 9 weeks. We will continue to monitor. And if there is a significant opportunity, we would certainly want to come back and give some public facing communication about that with a significant amount of time for preparation. For me to suggest any date would be, I think, a little bit irresponsible on my end, but just to say we would absolutely entertain it. We can, but that's still in the hypothetical sense. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I don't think any of us, I don't think there's anybody in the city of Atlanta or the state of Georgia who can state with certainty what we'll be able to do on a specific date at the end of October right now. It depends on so much on the community, and not just on the Atlanta community, but on the larger community as well, because so many of our teachers and staff do not live inside the city of Atlanta. And so it's important for us to know what's happening, not only in Atlanta, but in Fulton and DeKalb and Cobb and Douglas and many of the other counties and areas in which our staff members live. No, I wanted to clarify that, because the parents who want us to go back want to know how early that could happen. The ones that appreciate our concerns and our being cautious want to know that we're holding to that date. And as usual, we need to make sure that we're heard on that point. So to reiterate, right now, holding to October 23rd, it would take us a few weeks to get up and running between an announcement and an opening date regardless. And if we decide to change that date, then we would therefore, because we'd have to ramp up in our buildings, would be giving the community a few weeks notice in order to do that.
And have a special call. Yes, ma'am, if that's necessary. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm glad we summarized that just to make sure there's no confusion. I did not hear any shift in the administration's position, so I'm glad that we were able to clarify any confusion. Dr. Herring, what is keeping you up? What will be keeping you up at night over the next couple of weeks about the reopening and the pandemic?
I appreciate that question, Chair Estevez. Several things keep me up and continue to keep me up. I had an opportunity, and I'll talk about this momentarily in my presentation, to peek into several of the virtual classrooms. And I've shared this. I think it's important to state, for the first time in the history of public education, we get to peek into the houses and the homes of every single child we serve. I think that's not only unprecedented, but I think we should pay attention. Not to snoop. It's not about snooping. It's about literally seeing our students during a global pandemic and our teachers going above and beyond, trying to get them engaged as if they're jumping through the computer themselves. That keeps me up. Ever since I saw that, I've wrestled at night around how can we ensure that we don't lose them. I also think about our teachers. Every single virtual classroom that I had an opportunity to Zoom in, and I kind of zoomed all across the district, they are giving every bit of what they have in a virtual capacity. And I know that they're more than just exhausted from Zoom fatigue. I wonder and worry about them in that space as we continue. I think about the inequities that exist, because that's been highlighted, not just because of an opportunity to peek in virtually, but even when we look at the data that Dr. Lovett just shared, the disparities are from a health statistical standpoint. I worry about that in the space of just being a human being and knowing that as a leader, we have an opportunity to do something about certain things that's in our wheelhouse. And there are areas that are not our wheelhouse, but we're still having to do certain things. That'll keep you up at night. And then just the safety of it all. We have an outstanding cohort of principals in Atlanta Public Schools. I'm sure my arrival here doesn't make that new. I just get the opportunity to say it. They're up at night. And if they're up at night, I'm up at night. And although I don't get to hear everything that they share directly, I get to hear it a lot. And the things that they worry about, I worry about. And being able to give you answers that are much more concrete than hypothetical, that too, I think, is a space of concern. So that keeps me up. But whenever I finally fall asleep, it's not just taking it out of my brain, but it's the thoughts about what are we doing about it? And there's a level of reassurance there that I think is important to note, whether it's the principals or the teachers or the parents or our staff. We are still in unprecedented times, which means we have to bring forward to you some unprecedented suggestions around the next level of opportunity. I'm working with us to try to do that as well. I appreciate the question. It is a hard one. It's a hard one.
Yeah. And I appreciate you addressing that, because sometimes I get comments, questions that assume that we all want to be in this space, that we all want to be virtual, that we're just doing this to, I don't know, who God knows what, send a political message to find the easy way out, whatever people want to say about it, that virtual is ideal for Atlanta Public Schools. And from where I sit, it certainly is not ideal for my family. We want our son in the classroom ASAP. It's not ideal for teachers that I've spoken to from across the district who want to be in the classroom. And I know it's not ideal for anyone who's on this call. But at the same time, these same people, including the people on this call, are concerned with the fact that we know who the pandemic disproportionately affects. And when you look at the data, Dr. Lovett, I don't know which slide number was the one that new diagnoses or total diagnoses by race. If we can go to that slide.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know which slide that was.
Linda, can you
but I think it was like, it was one of the earlier slides, I thought.
Yeah. And now if keep going. Yeah.
But I think it might be
that. I think it was Chair Estevez, the one that identified 50% of new diagnoses are African American.
Well, that's new, but this slide is fine. I think this slide that's showing is fine. You know, we see here that over a 14-day period, the percentage has ranged in terms of demographics for African Americans in particular. Go back, Linda, to where you were. It's ranged 36% now, 60% in the pandemic, early on in the pandemic, and it's kind of fluctuated back and forth between 30 to 60%, at one point 68%. But in Fulton County, African Americans, Black people, account for 69% of the deaths during the pandemic. And when you add in all people of color, it's 75% of the deaths are people of color. And that is, when you think about a school district that is 75%, 78% Black and brown, it's a big consideration, because while we can work hard over the next year or two or several years to help bring our kids up to speed with where they need to be educationally, we can't help them recover from any loss that they would experience from this pandemic. And as an institution, we have a responsibility to take leadership in that and ensure that our families are safe, both students and teachers. So I appreciate the difficult decision that this administration has had to take for the well-being of its students and staff, even if I want my student to be in the classroom tomorrow. It's a struggle that we all have to deal with, but one that does invoke equity and does invoke the fact that regardless of where you go, virtual or face-to-face, Black people are the ones that are disproportionately being affected. And because of that, the decision has to be made. Someone's life versus education, we can always catch up with the education. It's much more difficult to restore a life. So I appreciate what y'all are doing for that. And I don't know if you wanted to comment on that, Dr. Herring, because I'm sure you've received similar emails alleging of, all kinds of other motivations aside from what's best for the child.
I have indeed, and I appreciate Chair Estevez, your capturing of that and capturing it well, and capturing it with the reality of the data and the reality of our inequities. And I would just like to add to that, even the capturing of the social and emotional wellness of those who have been impacted. And so, even pushing into the classrooms, I didn't just quietly observe. I talked with students, I talked with the teachers. In several of those instances, they were starting their day out with their social emotional learning activities and doing check-ins. I had one student tell me during his virtual engagement, he has COVID. His mother, who's a teacher in the district, has COVID. I asked how his mom was. This is during our check-in virtually. I've had individuals share that they've lost someone. And even in that space of loss, we're not even able to grieve nor say our goodbyes in the ways in which we're used to. All of us, including myself, have been impacted by that personally. And so the reality of the difficulty of this moment is real. We have no other agenda other than to ensure that we can do the best we can in this space, that ensure that as it relates to instruction and the day-to-day operations of a school system, that our children and our staff are well. And this is complex and difficult. And it requires, it seems, that we have to remind people we're still in a global pandemic, because is what you said, your circle, social distance, and yet you drive around and you're like, okay, so I'm not in all these circles, because there are circles in which we sometimes question, and to each its own. I understand that our core business is tied to the education of children and their long-term ability to be successful because of it. And so I appreciate those words. I just want to say that before I perhaps say too much. So thank you.
Thank you. And to close out the question portion of this presentation, we're in this season of being quarantined somewhat, and a lot of people want to get out for physical activity in the spring. Our playgrounds and parks at the schools, fields were closed because of the pandemic. And I know, Dr. Herring, I've spoken to you about this. I know several other board members have had concerns about this, but citizens want these playgrounds and these fields open so that they can exercise and be free to use them. Because oftentimes what we find in the city of Atlanta and in many of our neighborhoods, the school playground or the school park, the school field is sometimes the only green space that people have in their immediate neighborhood. So what's the status of those fields? Are they open? And obviously we're in a pandemic, so people need to heed those social distancing rules, but what's the status there?
Yes, sir. So hot off the press on this one for clarity around what the community should expect. And after having communicated within our own division around this and reaching out to schools, we will open up our playgrounds and our tracks for walking, as you've shared, but we will ask that occur between the hours to which it's not inconvenient for the school. That information will come forward this week. We recognize that that's important, so we want to be clear around schedules with the opportunity to do just that. So it will only be open during certain hours, and each school will identify that. But because there is, we recognize the desire, we are prepared to support that. And literally, I'm sharing that with a newness of conversations that have been ongoing this week. Our community should anticipate what that would look like. We will open that up. Playgrounds and walking fields. Let's just be very specific. Playgrounds and the walking areas, and there will be hours in which that would be able to take place. And so we will look to our schools so that we don't inconvenience them in that same space with that opportunity.
Thank you, Cynthia.
What about practice fields, and particularly those which are used by partners and those who community organizations which lease those from us?
So yes, we're not speaking to that. That would require individual conversations with the administrator, the principal, and then a follow-up for approval, in which we've, I believe, had that level of a protocol in the past. So that is not an immediate opportunity in that regard because of scheduling and whatnot. So partners would still need to engage in conversation with principals, who would then vet that for approval as needed, if possible. Thank you for that question, Board Member Briscoe Brown.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Herring and Dr. Lovett. I think we're ready for the next presentation.
Thank you. And I think the next presentation is mine. So I won't introduce myself. I'll just go into it. And as that presentation comes forward, I'll go ahead and start. So after weeks of preparation for what I've already shared, unconventional, unprecedented, unfamiliar school year, students, teachers, and staff all over Atlanta returned to Atlanta Public Schools for day one on Monday, August 24th, for teaching and learning. And I've said this, and I'll continue to say it. I think it's important to say it in the way that I feel it deep down inside. I have always and will continue to love the first day of school. I treasured my first day of school in Atlanta Public Schools. Even though much of it was in a virtual capacity, I still had the opportunity to walk the brick and mortar, to engage in a safe format with the community. And I am grateful that we had that opportunity. We visited our new and renovated buildings, including the legacy David T. Howard Middle School, the state-of-the-art Atlanta College and Career Academy, and the beautiful Humphreys and Hutchinson Elementary Schools in South Atlanta. As I shared earlier, virtually, I visited a dozen Zoom and Google classrooms across our district, and teachers and students left me impressed with their stellar, exemplar model of virtual learning. And although we know that there are opportunities to continue to adjust, they were outstanding. They were engaging, excited, and immersed in teaching and learning. And I thank each and every one of them for buckling down and getting back into school, even though they might not actually be inside our schools right now. And it's clear that all of this didn't happen by accident. The work we are seeing in our virtual classrooms are a direct result of a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, and a lot of heart. For many weeks, a cross-functional team within Atlanta Public Schools has been putting the wheels in motion across all of our departments and divisions. And I want to professionally and personally thank all of them as they continue to do just that. Preparing a district for any new school year is a challenge, but when you are preparing amid a season of pandemic and protests, well, that stacks challenges on top of challenges. So before I move into the actual update, it just behooves me to thank everyone in APS, from our senior leadership and central office support teams, to our principals and teachers, to all of our transportation, custodial, cafeteria, and other support crews for doing the hard work amid such trying times. I'd also like to thank you, our board, for supporting us during all of these efforts. We made it to day one, and we are still well into a successful 2021 school year because of all of you. And again, we did not arrive at day one by accident. We got there through preparation, and more preparation. So we'll jump to slide 2. At the start, we came in with this singular goal. All Atlanta public school students, parents, staff, and facilities are equipped and ready for teaching and learning to begin on the first day of school. To reach that goal, we created objectives that include effective teaching on day one, increased communications and collaboration, improved managing and monitoring of tasks for day one readiness, and optimal support for schools. Let's take an overview look at our day one readiness process. If you jump to slide 3. First, we made sure we got feedback from parents, teachers, principals, and other members of the APS community about the 3 reopening models: virtual, face-to-face, and a hybrid. Next, the schools and academics leadership team completed feasibility studies to aid in decision-making. And then next, each division used the results of the studies to plan day one tasks, finalizing the tasks following our announcement to start the year in a virtual instructional model. Finally, the day one team executed and monitored the tasks through weekly collaboration with our reopening work group to ensure a successful start to the 2020-21 school year. Next slide. By day one, the team achieved 98% completion of about 7,500 back to school readiness tasks, thanks in part to regular engagement with the principal feedback task force. Throughout planning, the day one team tracked readiness in 8 hot button areas for back to school readiness priorities: building and campus readiness, bus transportation, HVAC, information and instructional technology, principals list, staffing, instructional material and resources, master scheduling. Please let me take a moment to thank our day one team. Dr. Emily Massey, Associate Superintendent, who led the day one team. Larry Wallace and Shalonda Tucker, who provided support and project management expertise. All of the day one committee members, which include about 40 colleagues across all divisions. I also want to send a special thank you to Dr. Katika Lovett, who presented to us this evening, and to Dr. Danielle Battle, who has been serving as interim chief of academics. Dr. Lovett, as you know, serves as our assistant superintendent of student services. They have led our reopening committee amid COVID-19, and they were assisted by Shalithia Champion, who served as project manager. Let me say that all of them have led with a stellar and exemplar manner of professionalism, support, and energy. And I am, as a transitioning superintendent, extremely grateful and impressed with their efforts, because without their efforts, we would not have arrived at a successful day one, 2020. So Dr. Battle, Dr. Lovett, and Ms. Champion, thank you. Let's look at, that's right. Let's look at some of the work we launched. We launched an intensive community engagement campaign that we called Return and Learn. Among the many facets of this effort were the Back to School Bash, with both a pop-up or local version and a digital district-wide event, as well as a traditional day one. The Be There initiative adapted for a season of pandemic and a season of protest. The goal of Return and Learn simply stated, we will ensure that students and families have information and resources for virtual learning from day one and throughout the 2021 school year. As part of the work, we distributed more than 10,000 backpacks filled with school supplies. And I want to thank the Empty Stocking Fund for their partnership. We could not have done this without you and so many other partners and volunteers. We reached thousands of viewers for our digital bash events, which included a kickoff event, a live DJ party, a physical workout with the Hawks and parent universities. And as you can see here, we had a lot of interest from various TV, radio, online, and print media outlets. I'd like for us to jump to slide 6. Again, we reached thousands in the APS community with our various digital bash events. We got the word out about Return and Learn in APS like no other district in Atlanta, in Metro Atlanta. In fact, like few districts in the nation. And I am extremely proud of our district for those efforts. Now I would like to go through each department in APS to illustrate the detailed work that goes into returning to learning in Atlanta Public Schools. And as you can see with teaching and learning in our schools and academic office, they accomplished a lot. Now, I won't go through every single task, but I wanted to give you an overview look at the great work of my colleagues. We can certainly go into more details if you have any questions or comments at the end of the presentation. With advanced academics, you can see that the team spent much time researching and collaborating to plan for strategies to support our students through a conversion to a 4x4 schedule in the virtual space. We have focus groups. They worked with school leadership. They collaborated with curriculum and instruction. They identified and procured online instructional platforms and resources for virtual instruction. And as a result, we have a robust plan for IB, advanced placement, and related courses for not only a virtual 9 weeks, but for the rest of the year, whether we are in person this year or not. And in looking at CTAE, that team prepared for virtual learning by assembling more than 2,000 take-home kits so that our CTAE students can continue hands-on project-based assignments. Our teachers engaged in professional learning. We've had community meetings. We prepared for CTA instruction at a distance, especially for our students at the new Atlanta Collagen and Carrera Academy. And speaking of this academy, I toured that beautiful brand new learning space. It is state of the art. It is inspiring. It's workforce driven, but we do not have our scholars there yet. But our teachers are prepared to work with our students so that their lessons can seamlessly resume when they step into the academy for the first time. Slide 8, please. We are prepared for dual enrollment. We engage with our community through town halls and collaborated with numerous partners with expertise in the bilingual education space. We have master scheduling guidelines and program updates in place to ensure schools are following state guidelines and FTE requirements. And for our signature programs, we conducted many professional learning sessions to ensure the fidelity of signature program implementation in a virtual learning environment. Professional learning has been key to return and learn. Look at some of the sessions we held just in teaching and learning. Orton Gillingham, Foundations and Just Words, programs in ELA and math. We modified core and extend core content, along with our guidelines for our virtual instruction model, and then endeavored to put resources behind all of it. Next slide. Now, early learning poses a particular challenge for the virtual instructional model. I have visited a few kindergarten classes in Zoom and Google Meet. And our youngest scholars, many are able to engage and crave the face-to-face interaction. We know that they miss it. They crave, our youngest scholars absolutely crave face-to-face interaction. We know this. But our early learning team has worked hard offering professional learning, numerous fireside chats, and other supplies and supports, as you can see here. I want to highlight that we have offered summer transition programming for our rising pre-K and kindergarten students. We launched dual language immersions pre-K classes at both Benteen and Garden Hills Elementary Schools, and we offered 4 pre-K classes at Atlanta Virtual Academy. And I must praise the partnerships with GEARS, the Atlanta Caregiver Uplift Fund, PACT, and Quality Care for Children, which have provided invaluable assistance for our parents. For example, PACT, PAACT, and APS provided matching $10,000 grants to fund about 24 children with short-term, about 4 weeks of tuition assistance. But we need these young scholars back in our schools as soon as possible. Next slide, please. Turning to professional learning in general, you can see the levels to which we provided these supports to our colleagues. About 200 participated in a virtual 2-day Instructional Coaches Institute. Another 338, including myself, engaged in our 5-day virtual new teacher orientation, and about 3,500 employees participated in some form of professional learning. So we continue to keep social emotional learning at the forefront, especially amidst these trying times. You've heard me mention that earlier. We've held community gatherings to help the APS community transition back to school as part of the trauma to transition work. And we have provided numerous supports and resources to help with self-care and general well-being of everyone, students and staff in Atlanta Public Schools. Next slide. Moving to intervention and support, this is the team that leads our trauma to transition efforts to support the health and wellness of students and staff members during the pandemic. We trained all of our principals and assistant principals. They also created the peach heart icon in my backpack to improve student access to hotline numbers, support phone numbers, and email addresses for social workers and counselors. Our special education team has been hard at work in coordinating the openings and relocations for new and existing regional classrooms. Through professional learning and other supports, they are developing and executing virtual learning contingency plans for all students with disabilities, many who require face-to-face interaction, even amid this pandemic. So we want to acknowledge that we're keenly aware of those needs and we're working to support them. And even during virtual learning, next slide, we need our student discipline team to be on guard as we have had disciplinary issues in this space. We have. This team created virtual guidance and efforts to provide direct behavioral supports to students. In student assignment and records, we processed 849 school choice transfer applications, improved on-site registration appointments, and implemented a new records transfer system for external K-12 districts to request records of former APS students. With after-school and summer programs, we transitioned our Power Up Summer Bridge program to a virtual platform. In collaboration with the Office of High Schools, we graduated 83 additional students through the WINGS program hosted remotely by Phoenix Academy. Congratulations to those newest members of the graduating class of 2020. And now as we turn to accountability and technology, we must really give it up to Bill Karich, Femi Aina, Dr. Aaliyah Henderson-Rosser, and Michael Lamont, and all of their teams for stepping it up during what, without a doubt, has been perhaps the most complex, depending on where you're from, complex challenge of their careers. And it has been a challenge. But to Bill, Femi, Aaliyah, and Michael, I say to you, again, in the presence of our colleagues, thank you for stepping it up and doing an outstanding job. We cannot thank them enough. And yes, opportunity still abounds, but they have been exceptional. And it starts with the information technology. So let's start with that. At the start, I want to thank this board for approving the contract to lease Apple iPads and HP Chromebooks to provide one-to-one technology for 40,000 APS students. Again, I want to say this. Thank you to the board for approving the contract to lease Apple iPads and HP Chromebooks to provide one-to-one technology for 40,000 APS students. This has been critical to ensure quality teaching and learning continues even while we are apart. We could not appreciate that more. I am also pleased that about 30,000 families responded to the APS Technology Readiness Survey, which supported our efforts to distribute more than 22,000 devices and 6,700 hotspots to students during Runway to Return and Learn. 22,000, I'm sorry, that's a big difference. 22,000 devices. This team also distributed 475 laptops to new teachers and staff at onboarding and completed installations and relocations of technology at 11 of our schools. And then our data and information group. They provided virtual scheduling training for all schools, upgraded Infinite Campus to allow for hybrid schedules if we move to that model, and purchased the STAR Universal Screener for all Atlanta Public School students. Next slide. And although I don't have time to outline every task the instructional technology team completed in time for day one, but amid all of the teacher and staff training, this team established an open Zoom room for on-demand teacher support. I also want to highlight that they streamlined my backpack to make it easier to use. They created separate virtual learning help desk for parents and students, as well as a parent university website to help parents navigate their child's virtual learning. They extended course offerings in Atlanta Virtual Academy to include middle school work and through Ava Junior to serve students from pre-K through 5th grade. That was outstanding efforts and work, and it has made a significant difference. Our media centers remain active even in the virtual space, as our library media specialists will facilitate small group instruction for remediation and enrichment, and will host weekly story times for students in pre-K through 5th grade, and virtual book clubs for middle and high school students. They are working to provide more access to books through Little Free Libraries, our Fulton County Library Class Pass partnership, the APS e-bookshelf, and MyOn Reader. Next slide. Looking at the data from the first week, I am very encouraged by the levels of participation. After the first week of school, we collectively achieved a district-wide student login rate of 90.2%. And this represents a significant increase of 20.6% over our average login rate of 69.6% last spring. This data comes from a number of instructional and technology tools and platforms that track student login and activity. And these platforms include Active Directory, Google Classroom, Google Drive, Google Console, Silence, My Backpack, Seesaw, and Securely. And among these highlights, this is what we also saw. All of our traditional schools exceeded 70% login rates. All grade levels 3 to 12 exceeded 90% login rates. And except for the first day of school, when we experienced the nationwide Zoom outage, our daily student login rate hovered around 80%. We know that thus indicative of the connectivity that continues to happen, and we continue to monitor that. But again, that's a kudos to our families and to our students for showing up and connecting. Next slide. As always, our finance department remained hard at work ensuring that our $842 million operating budget conforms to a virtual instructional model. The budget includes $281 million to continue the district's commitment to increase equity throughout the system using the Student Success Funding Formula. Amid this pandemic, our finance team established CARES Act spending protocols and led the PPE committee, developing district-wide usage guidelines as well as centralized personal protective equipment acquisition and distribution. The department has implemented and streamlined a variety of systems and processes to continuously improve the final structure and outlook for Atlanta Public Schools. And not the final structure, but the financial structure, And kudos and a great job to Lisa Bracken and our finance team. The next slide, please. Despite the challenges of a pandemic, human resources filled 100% of principal and assistant principal vacancies. And that is outstanding. This is something to shout about. And we are certain that APS started our 7th consecutive year with fewer than 10 teacher vacancies on day one at only 4 vacancies. This team's work enabled us to provide a pay raise to increase minimum wage for full-time employees to $15 per hour. Again, this is during a pandemic. And among all of the other tasks, I want to note that the district successfully transitioned more than 5,000 employees to a virtual work environment and implemented related administrative regulations and procedures to support teleworking. This also included updating administrative regulations and internal procedures to comply with the new Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, emergency paid leave requirements. Outstanding work, and to Sky Duckett and team, great job. And now we turn to operations. Next slide. First, with a look at our facilities. Of course, they have spent the summer cleaning our schools extra well in response to COVID-19. Our crews already get our schools sparkling clean for every day one. and I visited many of our schools over the past few weeks, so I can personally attest that our schools are clean and sanitized to welcome students back in a future and safe time. So whether it's in the future or even right now, our schools remain safe and clean. I visited all of our renovated schools. As I shared earlier, I started my day one at David T. Howard Middle School, where once walked kings, future mayors, Olympians, NBA stars, and business leaders. The transformational efforts to bring the former APS school back into the educational fold defies description, and several of you were there with me. The engaging classrooms, the cafeteria with its enormous windows, the bright new media center, a preserved classroom where King, Dr. King, may have learned himself, and also the restored gymnasium. Every square inch of Howard inspires much like the school's famous alumni do today. I appreciate how the team preserved one of the classrooms so that it continues to look as it did when Dr. King might have learned there. I also visited the brand new Atlanta College and Career Academy, now complete at the Dr. Michael E. Mays campus. The state-of-the-art labs and workrooms sparkled with equipment ready for our scholars. And as I shared earlier, we also visited Humphreys and Hutchinson Elementary Schools in the South Atlanta cluster, which reopened this summer after months of extensive renovations. I cannot say enough about the new STEM labs and all of the updates at both schools. Amazing work, and I will continue to say, we cannot wait for our scholars to get there soon enough when the time is right. Facilities crews remains hard at work on renovations for Grady High School, Woodson Park Academy, Barack and Michelle Obama, Morningside, and West Manor Elementary Schools. A move for Springdale Parks Kindergarten Center and several HVAC projects. And regarding transportation, of course, they partnered with the IT and nutrition departments to deliver devices and meals to students and has prepared 100% of bus routes in preparation for a return to face-to-face instruction when it's time. Next slide. The nutrition department within operations launched the Order My Meals process where all APS families must pre-order meals for the following week. And this is one of my many reminders to get your orders in before midnight every Monday to get your meals, 5 breakfasts and 5 lunches for every APS student the following week. The first 2 weeks of school, APS delivered more than 57,000 meals. 57,000 meals. I want to also remind you that as a part of the community eligibility provision, or what we call CEP, we provided free breakfast and lunch for all students enrolled in 54 APS and food service charter schools. And as a part of the federal eligibility application, or FEA, students enrolled in 21 other schools must apply to qualify for free or reduced meals by completing the online FEA form at www.atlantapublicschools.us/nutrition. In safety and security, our team hired and trained 6 additional SROs, introduced implicit bias and de-escalation training, and deployed several other measures to keep our students, staff, and schools safe. So special thanks, next slide, to our Chief Operations Officer, Larry Hoskins, and to his team for doing an outstanding job, a Herculean job, ensuring that we were prepared for day one. We could not have completed 98% of any significant percentage of the day one task without the critical support of our partners. And so I do want to take a moment to just acknowledge that. I've already thanked the Empty Stocking Fund for the partnership with distributing backpacks amid the digital and pop-up back to school bashes, but we need to thank them 10,000 times over. So thank you, thank you, thank you again. And then thanks again to thanks to our sponsors, Newell Brands, Mercedes-Benz USA, Georgia Pacific, Gas South, WellCare, Georgia Natural Gas, Wells Fargo, Lab Atlanta, AmeriGroup, and the General Federation of Women's Clubs for supporting the BASH and our efforts. We also partnered with other organizations to get students and families ready for day one, including materials needed for school supplies, technology, food, and child care. But I also want to give a special thanks to the Boys and Girls Club of Metro Atlanta, YMCA of Metro Atlanta, Chris 180, Raising Expectations, Emory Healthcare, the Georgia Statewide After School Network, the Atlanta Community Food Bank, Kroger, the Arthur M. Blank Family Foundation, United Way of Greater Atlanta, Warner Media, Lyft, and PNC Bank. It's important that we name each of them. Thank you, thank you, and thank you. That concludes our report. My team and I are now open to your questions.
Whew.
Yeah.
Man. Might want to take a little break. There was a lot there, but that signifies a lot of the good work that is happening across the system. So thank you, Dr. Herring, for your leadership, and thank you to your team and all of the staff across Atlanta Public Schools for making sure that day one was a positive one. I can tell you from being a parent, a relatively new parent to the system, my student being in the system for the second year, day one virtually was fine. There were very few hiccups, very little. I expected more hiccups, and there were very little other than the big Zoom disruption, but that didn't affect my son's kindergarten class because most of the students had iPads. So it was amazing that what y'all pulled together over the summer to ensure that kids had what they needed to start the school year. So thank you. And Ishay Collins, I think you had a question.
Yeah, just I share the same sentiment as Jason. Just where everyone was kind of like nervous and iffy about what day one would be and look like, and I had the opportunity to tour and join some of the openings. So I really appreciate that. Just two questions. I think one, and just make I know there was the push in regards to the Chromebooks and making sure that every child had one-to-one, and there was a few hiccups in helping families get access. And so the first question just kind of go towards now day one is over and we're in this space. Just kind of a quick overview of what monitoring looks like in that space, just to make sure children are continuing to continue to access and log on. Because I know that was something that we were dealing with, where at the beginning there was high rates of students accessing, and then I think they just kind of over time were, I don't know if it was fatigue or not, but didn't access it. So that's the first question. And then the second is around the nutrition program. And so I do know, like, the ordering the meals at the beginning of the week is new, has been a new thing for parents. Just kind of wanted to dive in, and get your thoughts and feedback on I guess additional things that you were seeing and observing in that practice. Mm-hmm. And is there have there been any additional strategies to make sure that food and nutrition gets out to all children? Because I received a few, I think, I don't know other board members did, but I know access was complicated for some of our families that was led by elderly households, and those schools stepped in to help. That, so I really, really, truly appreciate, but just kind of want some more dialogue around that as well.
Thank you, Board Vice Chair Collins, and I will just jump right into that. So the first one was relative to the deployment of devices and also the login capacity and continued monitoring of that. So I won't take us back to the slide. It might be several clicks to get there, but one of the things we've tried to maintain our commitment to is the ability to monitor login. The monitoring of login, what I gave you was a high level view. We have the capacity we are looking at that by cluster, also by school. And I also have to add that the role that our school administrators, our principals are playing, teachers not only have that direct face, although it's virtual in terms of the logging in, but that's also our means of monitoring some form of a form of attendance. And so we are monitoring that daily, and we are also able to track where we see high levels of continued login activity, and if there is a trend of decline. We are at day 11 of the first few weeks of school. And so obviously those numbers are still at a high number, but we continue to monitor that regularly. So I just wanted to speak to a different level of how we are taking responsibility for that, not just on a weekly, but on a daily basis. And then the other thing that I have learned in my direct conversations with principals relative to those students who are not logging in or who have not shown up is the ability for them to know who those families are and to reach out to have an understanding as to what is happening. And if indeed that's a technological challenge, or there's some other option that they are considering, or they simply need help. So all of that continues and remains. And in all of our levels of being able to supervise from one area to the next, that's been a committed practice. And I can assure you that we will continue in that space, and we'll be able to give an ongoing report as needed in that regard. I hope that speaks to that question. It is my understanding to date how we're monitoring it, and we'll continue to trend. Now, as a reminder, when I shared the data on the login percentages, I referenced several platforms that we're able to look at, and many of those platforms are complementary to the grade level, which allows for us to either go by grade level or school, but do it in a more comprehensive way to say, and so this is what it looks like for the district. The other was relative to food services and our own level of opportunity. So I think just in general, because it requires several steps, and those steps require a week's advance notice, even when several of us were distributing food in that first week, we learned that there were families who showed up, and we of course made meals available, but they either had complications trying to go through the process, not because it wasn't working, but because they just hadn't found that groove, if you will, and also that they just need assistance in that regard. Because there are a few steps, but we still need those steps to be executed. So I will say that for us, I've continued to ask parents if this is an audience in which we have them. Of course, we'll continue to push out from the school to let the school help you if indeed that is an area of challenge, because the meals are available. They are. And I do think there is an additional opportunity for us to execute even more creativity in communities where we don't want to rely solely on our web-facing presence to be the way that they are informed. I think that's always an issue, and it's always an issue of equity and communication. And so I'll certainly stay in communication with our team around how we can help our schools reach out to the families. Again, you'll hear me refer back to schools, because at the end of the day, they are the front line in terms of best form of communication. As much as we can help them, we certainly will. And I want to own that I don't know if I answered that question to a point of plan A, B, C, D. I just want to own that there still continues to be opportunities, and I will work with the team in regards to reaching out to those communities that we know that need exists. And if we can help increase those numbers, we certainly will. And then finally, I don't want to confuse this information, but I'm optimistic that we may be able to also potentially lean back to our summer feeding model. I've been given some possibilities of that in terms of making our meals available. As that becomes concrete, we'll also make sure we message that out. That takes away from some of the different criteria that's required for meal distribution. So that's been placed on my radar, but I haven't received final information on that just yet.
Thank you. That's suffice. Thank you so much.
Any other questions from board members? Dr. Herring, on attendance numbers, I understand the login, but when can we expect concrete attendance? How many students are actually attending their live teaching sessions?
Yes, I have made a request for that data, and we'll be able to give a more specific date, perhaps at a date of when before the end of this week, Chair Estevez, and it's quite possible that I could potentially give those numbers as well then. And I do want to just clarify, part of that window of needing to purge is we need to make certain that every student can log in. And so as we are working through that process, once we clean that data up, I will make certain I inform the board. If that's not this week, as a date as to when I can share that with clarity.
Thank you. And I'd like to give a shout out. I saw on social media, Douglas High School, there were the leadership team at that school was literally going out and knocking on doors of kids who did not make it to the first week of school, which was amazing to see that kind of interaction by students or by staff reaching out to students to ensure that they had what they needed to log in if they did not log in the first week of school. And I know that I've gotten questions about that, like how is, what is APS doing to market to families? And at some point, I mean, you can do as much TV and as much radio and let people know when they're supposed to start logging in and what they're supposed to be doing. But at some point you reach the critical mass, and then you have to go for the rest of the families on the ground and go face to face with them. You can't rely on social media or mass media to do that. You have to actually knock on doors. And I saw that happening in the Douglas cluster, which was exciting. And I know it's happening across the system, but I just wanted to shout that out.
Thank you. And I do want to say that our login numbers went up even more the second week. In preparation for this, some of this data we were preparing in time for us to launch this out. But even in the conclusion of last week, we saw an increase in the percentage of logins. And as I shared earlier, they hovered around 90%. So to know that they're continuing to go up is, I think, is important to note. Thank you, though, for that shout out, and shout out to Douglas in that regard.
Cynthia?
Yeah, I just want to stop here, and Dr. Herring has spent a huge amount of her presentation thanking other people. I want to thank her on behalf of the board and the entire APS community. I was with her for the visits on day 1 and day 2 and watched her interact with creativity, with intelligence, with interest, and with love with every single person we encountered. She did not pass anyone in the hallway without reaching out to say hello, safely, of course. She listened and interacted and was genuinely excited, and in some cases moved to be standing where we were when we were. And I just want to thank you, Dr. Herring, publicly for the grace that you extended to everybody the last couple of weeks, and the leadership you've provided in an atmosphere, again, of grace, of love, of nurture, and of encouragement for everybody from the top of the organization all the way through and out into the community as well. So just thank you.
Thank you. I'll say thank you. Thank you, Board Member Briscoe Brown. I appreciate that. Here to serve. Yes, ma'am.
We're going to end on that note. So thank you. With that, Madam General Counsel, I don't know what kind of magic we're doing here, but no executive session
They're on a roll. There is no executive session.
Month. Now, I should not joke around that way. There is no executive session this month because this is the second or third month in a row, Nina?
I believe so.
And that's likely a number of factors. One, it's the summer. We had the pandemic. So there's likely a reason why. It's just the environment that we're in. But we fully anticipate that as the school year has started, we'll start to get reasons to go back into executive session. So I want to make sure the public is not alarmed by the fact that we don't have executive sessions. They tend to be around personnel and students, and we just haven't had those issues as of this point, or litigation. And knock on wood, we do not have those situations that require us to go back into executive session. With that, I think we can take a break until 6 p.m. for our community meeting. So I'll give everyone back 34 minutes. For those watching from home, what we'll do is we'll sign off, and then we'll log back in at 6 o'clock to hear community comment. And then right after community comment, we'll immediately go into the legislative session. Anyone have any questions?
Jason, is it the same Zoom link? I know sometimes we have different ones. We're going to be.
It's a good question. Pierre?
I sent you an email with the information for that, and I can resend it if you need it.
Yeah, I've got the reminder that you sent at 1:30. So is there another one, Pierre?
It is.
Okay, I'll look for it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll follow up with you after.
All right, thank you so much, all. Let's go ahead and log off and log back in when it's time. Thank you.